I've been trying to recommend movies. The best I can come up with at the moment for Macbeth is the one starring Ian McKellen, soon to be appearing in The Hobbit, The Unexpected Journey. He plays Macbeth. Judi Dench plays Lady Macbeth. It's a decent enough production. It won't ruin it for you. It's not all that good, frankly, but Roman Polanski directed a version of it, which I need to review before I can recommend it. It's very powerful in certain ways, but it's kind of like a Roman Polanski horror movie based on Macbeth. So I'll watch that over Thanksgiving and then let you know. There's a whole other bunches of Macbeth, but those are the only two ones I own on DVD. There's one with Patrick Stewart. Doesn't sound very good to me from the descriptions, but again, Patrick Stewart's a great actor. But anyway, I always like you to be able to see these things as plays, and the one with McKellen and Dench certainly isn't anything quite to sneeze at. Okay, I think that's all the business. We turn now to what's famously known as the Scottish play. Macbeth is supposed to be cursed in the theater, and actors don't mention it. It's bad luck to say Macbeth, so they say the Scottish play. There's even an episode of The Simpsons where that comes up. Indeed, we are going to look at it as a Scottish play. This is going to be a kind of lesson in geography today, as you can see from the board. Now, this is an interesting example of how people try to find contemporary meaning in the play. Here's a play that probably came out around 1606, 1607. That is not long after James VI of Scotland became James I of England. And so this is one of those plays that people tie in to the court of James I. It's supposed to be a play that Shakespeare wrote in order to flatter James I and get in with his good graces. James had, in fact, become the royal patron of Shakespeare's theater company, which went from being the Lord Chamberlain's men to the King's men. James thought of himself as descended from Banquo. This has since been disproven, but at the time, the Stuart line was said to have descended from Banquo, and so this is supposedly Shakespeare's way of paying a compliment to King James. Now, I have to say that if this is Shakespeare's way of paying a compliment, I'd hate to see what he wanted to do if he was nasty, because if I were a king, I sure wouldn't want to be presented as being descended from these Scottish savages. We have someone from Scotland in this class, so I don't want to go too heavy on this. But you do see a very strong reflection of English prejudices against the Scottish in this play. The Scottish are basically presented as barbarians, and the English held up as a model of civilization. So I find it very hard to see this as a way of flattering James. And for that matter, to say you're descended from someone named Fleance, I mean, who wants to be descended from someone named Fleance? Come on now. And we'll see that the portrait of Banquo is not quite as positive as many people think it is. So I'm very skeptical of the idea that this play was meant to praise King James, and indeed, it's amazing that Shakespeare got away with this play, considering that several of his contemporaries ended up in jail for writing comedies where people spoke with heavy Scottish accents, including Ben Jonson. I'm going to treat the play in connection with Hamlet and Othello, and try to show you how these three plays work together. In a way, I'm going to use Macbeth to reinforce what I was trying to show you in Hamlet and Othello. That is, I think once again here Shakespeare is exploring the great fault line of Renaissance culture, the tension between classical and Christian values, and that what he's doing here, much as he did in Othello, is show us a pagan warrior who is confronted with Christianity and disturbed by it, perturbed by it, indeed ultimately unhinged by it. There's some remarkable passages in this play that we'll come back to, but I want to start off with. If you turn to page 43, which is Act 3, Scene 1, this is the scene when Macbeth is... Are we getting feedback there? Or is that some... Oh, something outside. Okay, just want to make sure. This is Act 3, Scene 1, line 85 on page 43 of the Signet. This is when Macbeth is confronting the murderers, and he's trying to get them to kill Banquo. He's evidently prepped them for it by telling them Banquo had worked behind their backs against them. So, line 86, do you find your patience so predominant in your nature that you can let this go? Are you so gospeled that you can let this go? Are you so gospeled to pray for this good man and for his issue? Are you so gospeled? That's actually a remarkable word there that Shakespeare seems to have coined. Gospeled as a verb there. According to the Oxford English Dictionary, this is the first appearance of this word in print, at least. So here's something. Shakespeare has Macbeth noting that the people of Scotland have been gospeled. They've been Christianized, and it's made them tame. It's given them all this patience, just as Christianity should be. And so they now don't have that thumas anymore. They're not eager enough to take revenge. And indeed, what the murderer says to this response, he asks, are you gospeled? And he says, no, we're men. We're not Christians, we're men. It's really quite extraordinary. We'll come back to this passage later to what the definition of a man is here. But there's a strong sense here of the opposition between being gospeled and having manliness. And then even more remarkably, on page 53, after Banquo has been murdered, and Macbeth is confronted with what he believes to be Banquo's ghost at this party. So this is page 53, Act 3, Scene 4, about line 75. Blood, Macbeth says, blood hath been shed ere now in the olden time, ere humane statute purged the gentle wheel. Aye, and since two murders have been performed, too terrible for the ear. He's talking about the olden time here, and what's that time? It's the time before humane statute purged the gentle wheel. It's the time before Christianity. It's the time before the humaneness of Christianity came to prevail in barbaric Scotland. The olden time ere humane statute purged the gentle wheel. And what was that time like? The times has been that when the brains were out, the man would die, and they're an end. But now they rise again. Here we are in the Christian world, and we now have the possibility of resurrection. And it just baffles Macbeth. You know, they used to be the good old days, you killed a guy and he stayed dead. It was so easy. Now we've been gospeled and we got humane statutes, and they come back. Now they rise again with 20 mortal murders on their crowns and push us from our stools. This is more strange than such a murder is. Now this is what I'm focusing on here. What I'm talking about when I'm saying that Shakespeare here portrays a pagan hero who is confronted with this Christian world. How new it is, I can't tell you, but Macbeth is still asking of certain people, are you gospeled? As if, you know, have you guys become Christians? There's a lot of Christians around suddenly. Are you some of them? Because we may have a problem with killing Banquo if you guys have gone all Christian on me at this moment. You really see this sense of the pagan warrior that his world has changed around him, and it's so much more confusing now. And it is deeply confusing and puzzling to him. Now, this will help explain sort of the whole tenor of Macbeth that makes it unusual even among Shakespeare's tragedies. That is, Macbeth is a very problematic hero. It's very difficult to speak about him as a hero. You want to say he's a villain. He's a tyrant. This is the same kind of figure that appears as Richard III, famously in one of Shakespeare's earliest plays. we know that these are tragic heroes in Shakespeare, but still we feel pretty comfortable calling King Lear a hero and Hamlet a hero and Coriolanus and Antony and Julius Caesar and even Othello. He does a terrible thing, killing Desdemona, but it's in response to Iago's machinations, and we still, noble Othello goes well with us. When you think about it, Macbeth is Shakespeare's most extreme case of a tragic hero in the sense he's really pushing the limits here of villainy, where the tragic hero slips into villainy. And you want to say he's just evil. But if you go to the beginning of the play, you'll see things aren't that way. He is brave Macbeth at the beginning of this play because he is the standard image of the pagan hero. This is back on page 4, and this is how we are introduced to him, namely in battle. And we see him as a Homeric hero, the kind of hero we're quite familiar with from Coriolanus. So this is page 4, so Act 1, Scene 2, about line 9. We're getting reports from the battlefield. The merciless MacDonald, worthy to be a rebel, for that the multiplying villainies of nature do swarm upon him. From the western isles of kerns and gallglasses is supplied, and fortune, on his damned quarrel smiling, showed like a rebel's whore. But all's too weak for brave Macbeth. Not evil Macbeth, not villainous Macbeth, brave Macbeth. Well, he deserves that name. Disdaining fortune with the brandished steel, which smoked with bloody execution, like valor's minion. Remember, beginning of this class, valor is the chiefest virtue in the Homeric heroic world. Like valor's minion, carved out his passage till he faced the slave, which ne'er shook hands nor bade farewell to him, till he unseamed him from the nave to the chops and fixed his head upon our battlements. This is brave Macbeth. He cuts a guy in half and sticks his head up on a pole. Sounds pretty savage to me, but now that's fine. And what does the king say? Oh, valiant cousin, worthy gentleman. Oh, you're such a gentleman. You cut a guy in half and stuck his head up on a pole. And you do have to understand, gentleman was a stronger word than gentle meant noble. It's like saying a worthy nobleman. But there's already in Shakespeare's day, there's some sense, the modern sense of gentleman. It is so weird that he's being called a gentleman for here. And indeed, they now face some other powers from Norway, and line 35, dismayed not this, our captains Macbeth and Banquo. Yes, as sparrows, eagles, or the hare, the lion. Remember these comparisons from Coriolanus, where you compared ordinary people to tame animals and the great hero to the wild animals, sparrows versus eagles, hares versus lions. This is straight out of Homer, by the way. In the Iliad, this is the way Homer sets up the difference between his heroes and ordinary human beings. So again, this is all part of the Homeric image here, the hero. So they doubly redoubled strokes upon the foe, except they meant to bathe in reeking wounds or memorize another Golgotha. Wow. Golgotha is where Jesus was crucified. You might see this as a Christian passage, but it seems to me more likely to view it as an anti-Christian passage, because what they're doing is creating another Golgotha here, as like the Romans executed Jesus, and now here Macbeth and Banquo are taking care of the rebels. So I want you to see that at the beginning of the play, Macbeth gets praised as a hero for murdering people. Of course, at the end of the play, things are very, very different. If you turn to page 97, this is the very end, Act 5, Scene 8, about line 68, of this dead butcher and his fiend-like queen. I want you to get as strong a sense as possible of this contrast. Macbeth virtually in the opening scene, Macbeth in the last scene. In the last scene, he's a dead butcher. In this scene, too, he's a live butcher. In this scene, he's cutting a guy in half and everyone's praising for him. You know, Macbeth doesn't do this, but I could kind of imagine him in the second half of the play saying, you know, you were praising me for cutting MacDonald in half, and now you're all bent out of shape because I stuck a dagger in Duncan. You know, I mean, what's the difference? You know, we're Scottish. We kill people. That's what we do. And I want you to see that this is what I mean. You know, Coriolanus gets praised consistently for doing the stuff that Macbeth does. Homeric heroes get praised for this stuff. That's what they do. Now, of course, you have that turning inward here. The problem we've seen again and again. What happens to the warrior when he doesn't shift gears in domestic policy? Obviously, the point is you're supposed to kill the traitor MacDonald. You're not supposed to kill your legitimate king. But, you know, it's kind of hard to turn it on and turn it off. Henry V could do it. He could go from the lamb to the tiger back and forth. But we've seen the problem with these Shakespearean heroes is that they can't do that. It's not so easy for them to do that, most of them, and especially the tragic heroes. That's why they're tragic. And in a way, there's a tragedy here is that Macbeth is caught between antithetical realms of value, and the very qualities that make him heroic on the battlefield turned him into a butcher, into a fiend when those powers are manifest in domestic life. So once again, we're in a world of clashing values. Turn to page 70. This is Act 4, Scene 3. Very poignant lines from Lady Macbeth, about line 70 on page 70, Act 4, Scene 2, Act 4, Scene 2, about line 70. Whither should I fly? I have done no harm. But I remember now I am in this earthly world where to do harm is often laudable, to do good sometime accounted dangerous folly. Why then, alas, did I put up that womanly defense to say I've done no harm? This is like that moment between Shylock and Bassanio over the word good, the question whether Antonio is a good man. And we learn that Shylock and Bassanio were functioning with two different definitions of the word good. One meaning financially sound, the other being morally good. Here, too, we've got two different meanings of good. I am in this is a very Christian statement here. I remember now that I am in this earthly world where to do harm is often laudable. Yeah, we saw that in the second scene. Cutting people in half is lauded in the second scene. Christians not so happy about that. And indeed, to do good sometime accounted dangerous folly. Again and again, these plays turn on different conceptions of the good. The Conan the Barbarian definition, what is good, to slay your enemies before you and hear the lamentation of their women. Or this Christian notion of good, which is to do no harm. I think Shakespeare hit upon this subject, and I think his eyes must have lit up when he started reading his source here. Because he realized that he could play out in Scotland what he'd been doing in Hamlet Macbeth. And I offer you these geographies here to try to show you how the three plays work together. What we've been seeing is that in these plays, Shakespeare finds a borderland between civilizations, a borderland between a pagan world and a Christian world. And he focuses on the intersection where the characters are divided. So that in Hamlet, we saw Norway to the north, land of fort and brass, land of epic combat, Denmark in the center, sophisticated Christian Europe to the south, Paris, the land of fashions, courtliness, and tennis, Wittenberg, the land of the university, and Protestant Martin Luther. And Hamlet smack in the middle and divided between the pagan and the Christian world. He is a Christian given a pagan task of revenge. Othello, we got Cyprus in between Venice and Turkey. Venice, the world of Christianity, Turkey, the land of Islam, and therefore pagan from the Christian perspective. Cyprus, smack in the middle. Othello, the Turk turned Christian, who eventually reveals his inner Turk in the terms of the play, and indeed, in the end of the play, as a Christian, slays himself as a Turk. Okay, so now, a similar geography in Macbeth, very strongly developed. To the north of the play are Ireland and Norway, and they are presented as purely pagan and really barbaric. To the south is England, and it's strongly Christian. And Scotland, again, is the borderland. It's in the middle of the two worlds. Let me show you how that plays out in terms of the text of the play. That is, if you turn to page 4, back to those passages I was just reading. This is, so Act 1, Scene 2. Where are these rebel forces coming from? Well, they're coming from the Western Isles, the Hebrides, and they're kerns and gallow glasses. And as your notes point out, these terms refer to lightly armed Irish foot soldiers and heavily armed ones. These are obviously antique terms here. In Shakespeare's day, kerns would have been recognizable. People were still worried, you know, they were fighting in Ireland, and these are the kind of soldiers they faced here. So we've got these Irish soldiers with these kind of archaic military terms associated with them. And then on page 5, we see the Norwegian lord, line 31. Again, Norway seems to be a source of Vikings. I mean, we know this in history. I mean, when people still in Shakespeare's day pictured where the most barbaric people come from, well, they come from Norway. And we see that even on page 6, where Scotland's also being invaded by the Norwegian banners. This is still Act 1, Scene 2, about line 50. Norway himself. With terrible numbers, along with the disloyal traitor, the Thane of Quarter. So we've got a sense here, the forces that need to be suppressed are from the north. And again, for centuries, Europe had lived in dread of the Norsemen, who swept down from what we now call Scandinavia in their Viking boats and raped and pillaged. Even in Capital One ads now, we still have that image going. England is the very opposite of this. Page 59. So this is Act 3, Scene 6. When we first hear about the English court in any detail. So Act 3, Scene 6, page 59, about line 24. The son of Duncan, from whom this tyrant holds the due of birth, lives in the English court and is received of the most pious Edward, with such grace that the malevolence of fortune nothing takes from his highest respect. Thither Macduff is gone to pray the holy king upon his aid to Warwick, Northumberland, and Warlock Seward, that by the help of these with him above to ratify the work, we may again give to our tables meat, sleep to our nights. So this is Edward the Confessor, one of the most pious kings in the history of England, and just, you know, the most pious Edward. He is the holy king. Later we learn on page 76 how deep this goes. He can practice miracles. Page 76, Act 4, Scene 3, about line 140. That stay is cure, their malady convinces the greatest stay of art, but at his touch such sanctity hath heaven given his hand, they presently amend. This is the king's touch. He can cure the king's evil. As your note says, scrofula, called the king's evil because it could allegedly be cured by the king's touch. And we get this long passage that emphasizes the sanctity and the Christianity of the English king. about line 144. "'Tis called the evil, a most miraculous work, and this good king, which often since my here remain in England, I have seen him do. How he solicits heaven, himself best knows. But strangely visited people, all swollen and ulcerous, pitiful to the eye, the mere despair of surgery he cures, hang a golden stamp about their necks, put on with holy prayers, and 'tis spoken to the succeeding royalty, he leaves the healing benediction. With this strange virtue, he hath a heavenly gift of prophecy, and sundry blessings hang about his throne that speak him full of grace." Once again, this play geographically lays out what I'm calling the tension in the Renaissance between pagan or classical values and Christian values. You can just map it. To the north, again, is the pagan world. To the south is the Christian world. And Scotland's trying to make it to England. Here. It's trying to become Christian. And Shakespeare has a beautiful map on which to play out this tension that he sees so basic. That's why I think these three plays really do work together. I'm not calling them a trilogy. You know, Coriolanus, Julius Caesar, and Antony Cleopatra, I think, really are a trilogy, and we can regard them as such, and I'm not the only person that views them as such. I'm not calling Hamlet, Othello, and Macbeth a trilogy in that sense. One could almost call them the Christian plays as opposed to their own plays, but I'm not going to do it. But I do want you to see they have a lot in common, these three plays. My biggest regret in this class is I'm not doing King Lear because I don't think it fits into this pattern. It's interesting. And usually these three plays are classed with King Lear as Shakespeare's four greatest tragedies. Ever since A.C. Bradley's book, that's been the approach. And in terms of quality, there's a lot to be said for that. But I really do think they're quite separate from King Lear, which is set in a pre-Christian era and therefore doesn't involve this particular set of themes that I think holds Hamlet, Othello, and Macbeth together. If you'll think about those maps, and you're the first people on earth to ever have seen them all together that way, I think you'll see how these plays do hang together. Now, Shakespeare found a lot in his source to be able to pursue this. And again, we have this miracle of Shakespeare transforming his sources, though always beginning with something in them. And so one of his principal sources was Holinshed's Chronicles. And if you'll turn to page 107, if you have the signet, I think you'll see a passage that caught Shakespeare's eye. Where it says Macbeth's history, so this last paragraph on page 107, Dowada was married unto Sino the Thane of Glamis, by whom she had issue on Macbeth, a valiant gentleman, there's the word again, and one that if he had not been somewhat cruel of nature, might have been thought most worthy the government of a realm. And indeed, Shakespeare found in the source, in this Scottish history, a lot of admiration for Macbeth. On the other part, Duncan was so soft and gentle of nature that the people wished the inclinations and manners of these two cousins to have been so tempered and interchangeably bestowed betwixt them, that where the one had too much of clemency, that's Duncan, and the other of cruelty, that's Macbeth, the mean virtue betwixt these two extremities might have reigned by indifferent partition in them both, so should Duncan have proved a worthy king, and Macbeth an excellent captain. This had to catch Shakespeare's eye. It's Scottish Aristotelianism. It's presenting virtue as the mean between extremes here, and they are extremes we've been seeing, clemency and cruelty. It's exactly the way Shakespeare presented Henry V as the man who could combine clemency and cruelty. Here's talk of just that synthesis of antithetical virtues that I've been saying was at the heart of the Renaissance hope, that it could bring about a synthesis of classical and Christian values. To synthesize clemency and cruelty would be to achieve that Renaissance hope of bringing together the classical and the Christian. By the way, Nietzsche had a formulation for this in his notes, which was the Roman Caesar with the soul of Christ. And again, Shakespeare did not read Nietzsche, but that's a very pregnant phrase for understanding what Shakespeare is pursuing. And he plays the question, can you get the Roman Caesar with the soul of Christ, or do you get some strangely unhinged confluence of the two traditions that creates some kind of monster here, like Macbeth? It's interesting that this notion of combining antithetical virtues comes up at least twice within Macbeth. If you turn to page 35, this is Act 2, Scene 3, about line 110. Here, Macbeth raises the possibility, it's going to be an excuse for why he rubbed out the guards of Duncan to blame them for the murder, but he says, this is again line 109, who can be wise, amazed, temperate and furious, loyal and neutral in a moment? No man. In a way, that's the whole problem of Macbeth. Hollinshead says, who can have clemency and cruelty, or some mean between the two? Who can be a temperate and furious? Now again, Henry V was temperate and furious. He had kindness and valor both, but that was very unusual. And here again, on page 74, so this is Act 4, Scene 3, about line 90, Malcolm is discussing what are the kingly virtues. And it's a long list, but I'll just point to two principal words in the list, mercy and courage, which again is clemency and in effect cruelty. I mean, patience and fortitude. You see Shakespeare's sense that the comprehensive king would have to be like Henry V and create an amazing combination of values that are normally at odds with each other. And Shakespeare's tragedies precipitate out of that hope for a synthesis, an ethical synthesis that turns out to be unworkable in most ordinary human cases. Very difficult to combine clemency and cruelty at the same time. So let's talk about Duncan first and then turn to Macbeth, because in some ways this is the tragedy of Duncan as well here, because in this formula he represents a certain virtue. He represents the Christian virtues, clemency. But that creates a problem in his world. Just continuing on the bottom 107, the very last lines on 107, if you got the signet. The beginning of Duncan's reign was very quiet and peaceable without any notable trouble. But after it was perceived how negligent he was in punishing offenders, many misruled persons took occasion, therefore, to trouble the peace and quiet state of the Commonwealth by seditious commotions, which first had their beginnings in this wise. So Duncan is a possibility we've been looking at in this course, namely the fully Christian king who is too Christian to exercise the kinds of cruelty you sometimes need to do in politics. And indeed, Shakespeare goes out of his way to create that portrait of Duncan in the play. This McKellen movie does a very good job with Duncan. I'll recommend it if for no other reason than to see. But think about the opening line. This is page 4, Act 1, Scene 2. First words from Duncan. What bloody man is that? He can report, as seemeth by his plight, of the revolt, the new estate. Now, Duncan has very few lines here, but they're very telling, because what they show is he's not a battle king. He's not a field commander. He needs reports to know what's happening in the battle. Now, we can understand this. I can certainly understand it. You don't see me rushing off to too many battles. But think about the rulers we've been seeing. Coriolanus, even Brutus and Cassius, Mark Antony, Octavius got criticized because he won more in his lieutenants than in his person. Generally speaking, we've been seeing here that the ruler is a guy who leads his own troops into battle. Now, again, this is not something that we're used to in this country. We used to let them lead the troops in the battle and then elect them president. But this was a long-standing human principle that the great king led his troops into battle. We certainly saw with Henry V, Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar. The great rulers were men who risked their lives in battle and didn't stand around waiting to hear what happened. I mean, this McKellen film, Duncan is all dressed in white. I forget if he's wearing a cross or not, but he looks very Christian, and he's old, and he stands out among all these bloody men. And, you know, you could take the Monty Python route here with Duncan and sort of, well, what bloody man is that? You know, like he's scared. He's never seen blood before. You know, how dare you bring blood into the royal quarter? You're getting blood all over my nice white robe. But it's an amazing open line. Like, you mean there's blood in battles? I've got to go see one someday myself here. Now, I'm exaggerating this so you can see the effect here, but you know, he can report as seemeth by his plight. Guy's bleeding all over the place. And Duncan, since he's not going to find out about battle any other way, he's got to ask. And then the line I already read on the top of page 5, O valiant cousin, worthy gentleman. He better have a valiant cousin because he doesn't seem so valiant himself. And then again, you know, these lines just go by you, but look at them. Line 35, dismayed not this our captains Banquo, Macbeth and Banquo. Those are the words of a coward. Gee, weren't they afraid when a guy from Norway showed up, a Viking? He'd have been really scared. And, you know, yes, as sparrows, eagles, or the hare of the lion. You know, again, I'm not saying this is a reproach here, but it could function as one, you know. The first thing Duncan thinks of is, I'm frightened of Vikings. And so he's very lucky that he has Macbeth, and for that matter, Banquo, and for that matter, Macduff. There's actually, if you turn to page 6, there's quite a dispute over this passage around line 50. Whence comes that worthy thane from Fife, great king, where the Norwegian banners flout the sky and fan our people cold. Norway himself, with terrible numbers, assisted by that most disloyal traitor, the thane of Quarter, began a dismal conflict till that Bellona's bridegroom, lapped in proof, confronted him with self-comparisons, point against point, rebellious arm against arm, curbing his lavish spirit, and to conclude the victory fell on us. There's quite a debate over who Bellona's bridegroom is, whether it's Macduff or Macbeth. For example, in the film, they have made the decision, and they say at this point, till that Bellona's bridegroom, brave Macbeth. They add those two words to resolve it. No one has been able to figure this out. I will say I lean towards the idea that this is Macduff. Macduff is the Thane of Fife. These reports are coming from Fife. If this is Macbeth, why, one scene later, does he not know that the Thane of Quarter is dead and a traitor? He says on bottom of page 9, but how of Quarter? The Thane of Quarter lives a prosperous gentleman. If he just fought him in a battle and defeated him, it's very unlikely that Macbeth would refer to the Thane of Quarter as a prosperous gentleman. I mention this because, again, it fills out our sense at the beginning of this play of what Scotland's life. It's filled with thanes. Now, thane is a good old Anglo-Saxon word. They're a form of nobility, but distinctly feudal nobility, F-E-U-D-A-L. That is, thanes are in a system where the king is first among equals, and indeed the thanes choose the king. And we are in an elective monarchy here, because we will see in a minute that Duncan nominates Malcolm as the next king. And when Duncan's killed, Macbeth is chosen king by the thanes. This is a world where in the second scene, we see these Homeric heroes that are thanes. Banquo, Macbeth, and I'm saying Macduff. And notice Bellona's bridegroom, that associates him with the ancient world. Bellona is not a Christian figure, it's a Roman goddess of war. And notice point against point, rebellious arm against arm. That's really strange because it almost sounds like rebellious arm against rebellious arm. Point here is that what we've got here, these thanes, they're rebellious. They're spirited. These are guys full of thumos. It's actually hard to tell who's good and who's bad among them. If you look at the bottom of 13, we learn that the evil, traitorous Thane of Quarter had a decent death. This is Act 1, Scene 4, line 5, that he very frankly, he confessed his treasons, implored your highness pardon, and set forth a deep repentance. Nothing in his life became him like the leaving of it. He died as one that hath been studied in his death, to throw away the dearest thing he owed, as 'twere a careless trifle. There's something Christian about that because he's repenting. There's something, though, also classical about it because he's dying the way we've seen all those Romans die. So what we've got here is a volatile situation where you've got all these field warriors. Again, at a minimum, Macbeth, Banquo, and Macduff, and a very weak king. And a weak king precisely because he's so Christian. He's so meek. Page 21, Macbeth says of him, this is Act 1, Scene 7, line 15, besides this Duncan hath borne his faculties so meek. And again, Shakespeare's getting this from Holinshead and his chronicle, and the chronicle is setting it up that this is the problem with Duncan, and we see it on page 5, page 14. This Act 1, Scene 4, about line 10, when the king is reflecting on the death of the Thane of Quarter, there's no art to find the mind's construction in the face. He was a gentleman on whom I built an absolute trust. Enter Macbeth. One of those great stage directions in Shakespeare. This one probably is authentic. That is, you see here the problem with Duncan is absolute trust, which goes with the meekness. It goes with what Holinshead calls his clemency. The man is just too trusting, and especially too trusting in a world, volatile world of all these ambitious thanes who are such great warriors. And so he has just nearly been toppled by putting too much trust in the Thane of Quarter, and enter Macbeth. And Duncan is going to transfer his trust now to Macbeth. O worthiest cousin, line 15, the sin of my ingratitude even now is heavy on me. And this is, of course, his problem. As a non-fighting king, he's over-reliant on these great generals, these thanes. This is something Machiavelli would point to in a minute. Duncan should be wiping out these thanes here. Line 18, would thou hadst less deserved. Indeed, this is his problem. Would thou hadst less deserved that the proportion both of thanks and payment might have been mine. Only I have left to say, more is thy due than more than all I can pay. And that turns out to be really true from Macbeth's point of view. Macbeth is going to think, I didn't get enough here. There would be no Duncan today if it weren't for me. why am I not king? And notice the compounding of the problem, line 26, welcome hither, I have begun to plant thee and will labor and make thee full of growing. Noble Banquo, thou hast no less deserved, nor must be known no less to have done. So let me unfold thee and hold thee to my heart. And Banquo is saying, where's my new thaindom? Now we're going to look at Banquo next time to see a little suspicious aspect to him. But you see here the problem of this kind of system, which Shakespeare had explored in his English history plays. It's really difficult for a king to monitor this kind of situation, especially if he himself is weak. Shakespeare had portrayed this in his Henry VI plays, as I'll explain in a moment. The king is crucially dependent on these things, and he can't give them enough to reward them because he can't give them the kingship and still be king. And then Duncan compounds everything by the fatal mistake of naming Malcolm Prince of Cumberland. Bottom of this page, line 37, we will establish our estate upon our eldest Malcolm, whom we name hereafter the Prince of Cumberland. As we learn from Macbeth at line 48, the Prince of Cumberland, that is a step on which I must fall down or leap. That is, until Duncan names Malcolm effectively the heir apparent, Macbeth could reasonably expect that he might be the next king, because it's going to be an election, and the Thanes are going to choose. He has high honors among the Thanes here. He's emerging as the greatest of the Scottish soldiers, and so maybe he could get to the throne legitimately. Now, you can say that Duncan is worried already about that, and if he wants his son to succeed him, he'd better give him some leg up here. But Duncan really takes away his best tool for managing the situation by trying to name his son the heir apparent here. As long as Duncan played it coy, men like Macbeth, and for that matter, Banquo and Macduff, could say, all right, well, I've got a shot at king in the next election. But once Duncan tries to establish a dynasty here, he's in real trouble. If you go back to page 76, you'll see that England is presented as having a settled monarchy, a settled succession. This is Act 4, Scene 3, line 155. This is said of Edward the Confessor, and 'tis spoken to the succeeding royalty. He leaves the healing benediction here. The images again and again here are of England as having a settled monarchy, but Scotland is a much more fluid, we would say medieval or feudal situation. And so Duncan miscalculates here, almost pushes Macbeth into murdering him. Now there's one fabulous passage in the source that's not in the signet excerpts. You can read, there are separate editions of Holinshead's Chronicles, and there's actually a wonderful 8-volume set edited by Geoffrey Bullock called Narrative and Dramatic Sources of Shakespeare's Plays. And this is from this, but I really fell out of my seat when I read this passage. In Holinshead, MacDowell, one of the rebels, says this of Duncan. He calls Duncan, and I quote, a faint-hearted milksop, more meet to govern a sort of idle monks in some cloister than to have the rule of such valiant and hardy men of war as the Scots were. I mean, Shakespeare must have just lit up when he saw that. I mean, there it is. A contrast between Christian and pagan, and the faint-hearted milksop, fit to govern a sort of idle monks in some cloister, versus the Scots, such valiant and hardy men of war as the Scots were. Now, the amazing thing is Shakespeare had written these lines probably 15 years before he read this passage. I'm going to quote you something from the second part of Henry VI. These are the Henry VI plays, may be the very first thing Shakespeare wrote. They deal with the events that happen, obviously, after Henry V, but Shakespeare had already written that story that leads up. There's 3 Henry VI plays, and then Richard III, the 4th play in that first tetralogy. But this is what York says of Henry VI. You know, the War of the Roses, the Yorks versus the Lancasters. Henry VI was the last of the red-hot Lancasters. And York says this of Henry VI: "That hand of thine doth not become a crown. Thy hand is made to grasp a palmer's staff," that's a pilgrim's staff, "and not to grace an awful princely scepter. That gold must round and girt these brows of mine, whose smile and frown, like to Achilles' spear, is able with the change to kill and cure." That's the exact contrast that Shakespeare later found in Holinshead account. But Shakespeare had this English character, York, accusing Henry VI of being too Christian. You're not fit to carry a princely scepter because you should be carrying a pilgrim staff. And I handle it like Achilles' spear. Again, this is one of the earliest points I found in Shakespeare where he's working out the contrast between the classical or pagan and the Christian. And indeed, Macbeth returns to the earliest ground in Shakespeare, the contrast between Henry VI and Richard III is the contrast between Duncan and Macbeth. Again, we can't do everything in this class, but I'm trying to give you an outline so you can study more of Shakespeare in your lifetime. But Richard III is Shakespeare's first portrait of the anti-Christian tyrant, although Richard III masquerades as a holy man, and Macbeth is a more subtle and developed contrast. So it's, you know, looking at Duncan in the play, you see what happens when the king isn't warlike by disposition. When the king has been so gospeled and so brought under humane statute that he literally has to say, "What bloody man is that?" when he sees a soldier. Just doesn't have a feel for it. And doesn't cut it as a king, especially in a world as savage as Shakespeare presents Scotland, where again, in our opening glimpse, one guy is cutting another guy in half while everybody else stands around and applauds. So it really, the story of Duncan is really fascinating. Again, I think people don't explore enough the implications of that. Now, we're going to come to Malcolm next time and see how Duncan's son learns something from this whole experience and maybe does try to provide that synthesis between clemency and cruelty that his father could not. And we'll particularly look at that scene with Macduff in Act 4. Malcolm becomes a very interesting figure when you start to think of him as analyzing the defects of his father's rule and why his father got himself killed. So, all right, let's now talk more about Macbeth. Because what I want to talk about, what I've been trying to show you here is you know, here's this pagan warrior who's been Christianized. He's now living in a Christian society. He's doing well in it the way Othello does well in Venice. You know, Duncan could not defend himself against the Norwegians the way Venice can't defend itself against the Turks. So the Venetians hire Othello. They buy themselves a Turk as they see it. And Duncan's lucky he's got a pagan warrior as a cousin. And Macbeth can save his royal butt against the kerns and gallow glasses. But what we see in this play is what happens to this heroic figure when there's an enormous eruption of the supernatural in his life. And that's what happens when these witches come to him making prophecies, the famous prophecies about his future, that he'll become Thane of Glamis and then Thane of Cawdor, and then he'll become a king. This transforms the man. Now, these witches, these weird sisters, are presented as themselves sort of pagan figures. Weird is a Norse word that means fate, the sisters of fate. But what I want to argue is that what we're seeing in them, nevertheless, is an image of the supernatural, whatever else you say about it. They are a kind of demonic parody of Christianity, just as Iago is a kind of demonic parody of a priest. The intense relationship between Iago and Othello is on the model of a priest and a man whom he is both confessing and catechizing. As we saw, in a weird way, Iago teaches a form of Christianity to Othello about the transitoriness of reputation, about the corruption in politics, and above all about the sinfulness of human beings, the inner corruption that they harbor, and that's what unhinges Othello. In Macbeth, he gets taught a lesson in providence. Hamlet said there's a special providence in the fall of a sparrow. In this play, we see there's a special providence in the fall of a king. That is, Macbeth is taught that things are fated, F-A-T-E-D, in the world, and that he can go along with that to his own profit. What's interesting is to see the transformation, again from the beginning. Back on page 4, the first thing we learn of Macbeth, this is again Act 1, Scene 2, about line 17, is that he is disdaining fortune. Brave Macbeth, well, he deserves that name, disdaining fortune. Now, this is something we saw in Coriolanus, and again, do remember Coriolanus is written after this play, and I've set the plays up in what I'm calling a kind of logical order. But the classical hero disdains fortune. That's what his bravery means. He goes into battle with the understanding that he may lose, and that is what makes him courageous. But with Macbeth, we get a very different attitude develop. Let's see if I can find the passage where I think it's Act 3. Well, let's start in Act 1 anyway, with the transformation that he undergoes. Just look at how he thinks about the murder of Duncan. This is on page 20. It's perhaps his most famous soliloquy. So Act 1, Scene 7. If it were done when 'tis done, then it were done quickly. If the assassination could travel up the consequence and catch with this or see success, that but this blow might be the be-all and the end-all here, but here, upon this bank and shoal of time, we jump the life to come. Now, this is a great soliloquy, and indeed, we're in the world of soliloquy. I've been making this contrast between a pagan hero like Coriolanus, who doesn't have much inside him, and have these figures like Hamlet, Othello, Macbeth. They have such internal depths. Nietzsche says in The Genealogy of Morals, Christianity made man interesting. And Nietzsche is famous for writing a book called The Antichrist and being thought of as anti-Christian, and yet he says, Christianity made man interesting. And you can see it here that Shakespeare's Christian heroes have so much more depth. There's so much more tension within them. And notice the issue here, though. What's on his mind? The life to come. What he's focusing on is just what we saw Hamlet focusing on, the issue of his eternal soul. Now, he seems to be saying he'll skip it, That is, he's saying if this assassination could be done quickly, if it could be done in such a way as it could limit the consequences, then he'll do it. He won't worry about the life to come. But actually, when you analyze it, you see that what he's really trying to do is achieve the life to come here and now in this world. And that's, I'm going to offer as the formula for what Christianity does in distorting Macbeth's impulses. That is, what he wants is the be-all and the end-all. He wants something infinite here. That's what the afterlife is supposed to be. It's supposed to be the be-all and the end-all. Those are terms that describe something ultimate, something absolute. But he's going to look for a blow that might be the be-all and the end-all here. That's what attracts him to the whole idea of the kingship here. He imagines the kingship as something that will give him everything he wants. In a way, the witches have seduced him into this to make him think that everything will be fulfilled if he can have that kingship. And moreover, what he wants to do is to find it in an unshakable form. So that if you turn to page 42, Act 3, Scene 1, about line 47, now he's thinking about Banquo, to be thus is nothing but to be safely thus. If you contemplate that line, to be thus is nothing but to be safely thus, you will see what's distinctive about Macbeth as a hero and very unclassical. You cannot imagine Coriolanus saying to be thus is nothing but to be safely thus. There's something almost cowardly about that claim. The classical hero lives a life of danger. That's what defines him, is his courage in the face of danger and the courage in the face of his own mortality. Again, here, Homer's Achilles is the great example of that. Coriolanus is in many ways a recreation of that. We've talked about the absence of the afterlife in Coriolanus and in Shakespeare's Republic in Rome, and in the absence of a thought of the afterlife, at least afterlife anyone would want to live. It takes courage to risk your life, knowing there's nothing desirable beyond this world. Macbeth, like Hamlet, like Othello, very much lives in a Christian world of heaven and hell, and in which, therefore, there is something very potentially attractive about an afterlife, and moreover, in which now he wants his achievement secure. He does not like the classical world. Now, again, I'm saying he's a pagan, but he's been sufficiently exposed to Christianity to have developed a kind of Christian critique of the ancient world, so that, page 94, Act 5, Scene 8, why should I play the Roman fool and die on mine own sword? Whilst I see lives, the gashes do better upon them. I've quoted this line several times in the chorus because I knew it was coming. But you see the distinction here. He thinks of those Roman heroes as fools. They kill themselves when they could be fighting along in the hopes of getting everything. And that's Macbeth's sense here. What draws him into this cycle of crimes, and what's so powerful about this play is the logic of Macbeth's criminality here. Again, think about it. The murder of Duncan is supposed to be the be-all and the end-all. Kill this man and you've got everything. But it doesn't turn out to be true. Indeed, there's a fascinating passage on page 34. I'm always trying to suggest things to actors. But this is Act 2, Scene 3. This is Macbeth with what is undoubtedly a prepared speech when Duncan's dead body is discovered. This is page 34, Act 2, Scene 3, line 93. Had I but died an hour before this chance, I had lived a blessed time. For from this instant there's nothing serious in mortality, all is but toys, renowned grace is dead. If I were doing this, and I would have Macbeth start this as if it was a rhetorical prepared speech. You know, he's got to cover the fact that he's the murderer, and so he's got to seem really shocked that Duncan's dead and regret it. But I would have him realize, as he was speaking, that he is speaking a deep truth here. You know, again, I'm no Ian McKellen. You know, had I but died an hour before this chance, I had lived a blessed time. For from this instant, there's nothing serious in mortality. All is but toys. Renown and grace is dead. The wine of life is drawn, and the mere lees has left this vault to brag. You see what I'm saying? You could do it so that even in speaking the lines, he'd realize that what he made up was true. You know, the expectation here, we kill Duncan, I'm king, it's what was predicted, we got to do it. And then he realizes, no, there's Banquo. I'm promised the kingship, but the weird sisters promised Banquo he'd found the line of kings. So that's what gets us to page 42. Again, Act 3, Scene 1. To be thus is nothing but to be safely thus. And then our fears in Banquo stick deep. And now we learn the line 54, there is none but he whose being I do fear. And under him my genius is rebuked, as it is said Mark Antony's was by Caesar. It's fascinating. Shakespeare seems to be thinking ahead of Antony and Cleopatra's point. He chid the sisters when first they put the name upon me. They hailed him father to a line of kings. See, that's what upsets it. And notice, and put a barren scepter in my grip, thence to be wrenched with an unlittle hand, no son of mine is succeeding. If it be so, for Banquo's issue have I filed my mind, for them the gracious Duncan have I murdered, put rancors in the vessel of my peace, only for them, and mine eternal jewel given to the common enemy of man. Again, this is this pagan warrior who now has a Christian conscience, a Christian fear of damnation, but also this Christian longing for something absolute that will give him everything that he desires. Look at page 82. This is in Lady Macbeth Sleepwalking, which we'll come back to, but Act 5, Scene 1, line 40. A soldier and a feared. That's the paradox I want you to see that Shakespeare develops in this play. A soldier and a feared. Macbeth begins as a fearless soldier. The pagan warrior in the proper pagan setting, namely the battlefield. But once he turns that pagan murderousness inward and kills Duncan, he enters the domestic world the way Othello did. It's where Hamlet began. And suddenly everything becomes distorted for him. And this man who is chiefly characterized by his fearlessness to begin with, now suddenly becomes afeared. Now, Lady Macbeth sensed this. This is page 16. So Act 1, Scene 5. She's all excited. She gets this letter about the promise from the weird sisters. So Act 1, Scene 5, about line 16. Clams thou art in quarter, and shalt be when thou art promised. Shalt be what thou art promised. Yet do I fear thy nature. It is too full of the milk of human kindness to catch the nearest way. Now that's odd. We thought Duncan is meek and filled with the milk of human kindness, but Lady Macbeth sees it's in Macbeth as well. And again, these tragedies are filled with hybrid creatures. Hamlet, the very complex, intelligent, sensitive, Renaissance humanist and scholar, who nevertheless has this streak of classical fierceness in him and ends up killing half the people in the play. And Macbeth, this pagan warrior, who nevertheless has the milk of human kindness in him. To continue, thou wouldst be great, art not without ambition, but without the illness should attend it. And there you see all the complexity. We've been seeing this course about ambition. Ambition, which is a virtue in the ancient pagan world. It's seen as an illness in the Christian world. Pride is a sin, and yet it's still there. You never get rid of the thumos. And the question is, what happens now in the Christian world? It's going to have a form of illness to it. And that's that, again, in Hamlet, the currents turn awry. Again, we're seeing in this play the currents turn awry, that there's something twisted in Macbeth when he combines the soul of the spirit of a pagan warrior with the soul of a Christian here. Again, this man who was fearless now is saying he fears Banquo. So he's drawn further into this tragedy when he plots to have Banquo and Fleance murdered. And notice his reaction to that. This is page 51, when the murderers come back with the report. This is Act 3. This is page 51, Act 3, Scene 4, about line 21, when things are going great. Banquo's dead, but then Macbeth hears that Fleance has escaped. Then comes my fit again. I had else been perfect, whole as the marble, founded as the rock, as broad and general as the casing air, but now I am cabined, cribbed, confined, bound into saucy doubts and fears. What I want you to see there is this is a quest for perfection. Remember Othello, my perfect soul? Remember Hamlet, I could be bounded in a nutshell and count myself a king of infinite space were it not that I have bad dreams. The imagery is so similar among these three characters. Othello's obsession with Desdemona as alabaster. What comes along with the Christianity here is the dream of something perfect. What we have, this is the same all or nothing attitude I've been trying to show you in Hamlet and Othello, a kind of absolutizing the world. In Hamlet and Othello, it shows up chiefly in their attitude towards women, that they are either angels or whores, and they can't find a middle ground. A Macbeth can't find a middle ground here. He wants a perfect world that is founded as the rock, founded on a deep foundation. And in the absence of perfection, he has nothing. He's cabined, cribbed, confined, bound to saucy doubts and fears. And again, this is the logic that drives him. First, kill Duncan and I'll have it all. Gee, I don't have anything. Well, the only problem with Banquo and Fleance, if I kill them, I'll have it all. But no, he kills, first of all, they don't kill Fleance, and still he doesn't get it all. This attitude persists throughout the play for him. If you look as far into it as 86. This is Act 5, Scene 3, about line 20. This push will cheer me ever or deceit me now. Again, this is absolutism I'm talking about with him. He's constantly questing for the absolute act that will give him everything he desires. And of course, the sad thing about it is that it gives him nothing that he desires. That it is the saddest feature of the logic of the play, again, of the all or nothing logic. It's the line noughts. This is it's page 46. Lady Macbeth picks up on this. Act 3, Scene 2, line 4, naught's had, all spent, where desire is got without content. 'Tis safer to be that which we destroy than by destruction dwell in doubtful joy. Again, none of this middle ground. The issue is safety. This is very anachronistic, but let me just say there's something almost middle class about their attitudes, that they've become more concerned with safety than with honor and nobility and courage. Again, this obsession with safety, with eliminating any possible threat. And again, the paradox that you have to have it all or you have nothing. Or again, the notion of doubtful joy. All 3 of these characters, as Hamlet, Othello, and Macbeth, are haunted by forms of doubt, skepticism. And again, Coriolanus had no doubts. It's the advantage of being a big thug who can beat up 40 people at a time. You know, what we're really seeing here is a marvelous contrast between what I'll call the kind of primary notion of the hero and these intensely complex heroes that Shakespeare develops. Almost all people have a legend of a strong guy. It's Achilles among the Greeks, it's Samson in the Old Testament. Almost all peoples have epic stories of giants. And the image of the hero is a guy who can beat up 40 people. So again, a wonderful aphorism in Nietzsche where he says, ask a child if he would like to be more virtuous than his playmates, and he will stare at you in incomprehension. Ask him if he'd like to be stronger than his playmates, and watch his eyes light up. And that is the primary childlike sense of the heroic. It's there in our superheroes. It's why we dream of superheroes in our culture to this day. There's a kind of primary image of the hero, the superhero, which is basically, my father can beat up your father. It's a very simple notion of heroism. But it is enduring, and we never lose touch of it, and that's why we go to sports events and sit there for 3 hours in the cold watching 2 idiot teams trying desperately to lose the game until one of them ekes out a victory in the end. And we love it because we've triumphed. But these heroes like Hamlet, Macbeth, and Othello, they're so much more complex. Because they know something about that. Othello remembers, there's a day when I could have beaten 20 of you. And Hamlet says, I can beat him at the odds. He's willing to take the handicap. And Macbeth, was used to being praised for cutting people in half. But then they get into situations, as we say in New Jersey. They get into difficult situations. And it doesn't turn anymore on whether you can beat up 40 people or not. Now, again, I don't ever want to denigrate Coriolanus or Achilles or that understanding of the heroic, which is very much related to the military needs of humanity and the fact that we, to this day, need heroes like that. On the other hand, what makes Shakespeare such a great dramatist is that he introduces us to this incredible complexity when you ask one of these heroes to think and to make moral judgments. And again, that's I started with Macbeth as this fighting machine. He's a man who, by instinct almost cuts people in half. But he's actually, in many ways, very thoughtful. His wife says he's got too much of the milk of human kindness in him, and so he's faced with situations where the outcome isn't as clear-cut, and especially when he wants perfection now. It's so much easier and clear-cut in the world of the Roman plays generally. You might think about that, just the difference in the Roman plays. The death, the triumph of, the killing of one person and another almost always occurs in a battle scene. The assassination of Caesar is an exception to that, and it's why it's so morally complex. But generally, the notion in the Roman plays, in this pagan world, this ancient classical world, is that two heroes face each other on the battlefield as Hector and Achilles face each other. Notice in these three plays, we're dealing with murder. The battle between Hamlet and Fortinbras is in the distant past, the elder Hamlet and the elder Fortinbras. We're in such a darker world now. The Roman plays take place in daylight, because everything's transparent in a way. The heroes meet on the battlefield. Even the assassination of Caesar takes place in a public spot. These plays take place at night. It's very interesting. I mean, Macbeth is dominated by night, and clearly the imagery is at night. Hamlet as well, and even Othello. Othello carries in a candle just to see Desdemona when he's going to murder her. There's something so much darker about these plays. It's the paradigm. I mean, Christianity brings a new light to the world, but it introduces a new kind of evil. This internal evil. Again, we're in the Roman plays, we're in the world of Nietzsche's mass morality. It's a world of good and bad. In what I'm just going to very gingerly call these Christian plays, we're in a world of good and evil now. Characters like Iago or Claudius, or in a way Macbeth, and certainly we would say the Weird Sisters, they're evil in a way that really nobody in the Roman plays is evil. Maybe Ophidius, but because he's kind of Machiavellian and scheming, but even he is, forthright and forthcoming compared to Iago. When it's sort of we enter the world of the devil in these plays, and the demonic and the devilish. There are these new internal depths, but they often hide corruption. And so these plays are much more about evil. Indeed, evil is the heart of these three plays. In fact, Macbeth is fundamentally about transforming a pagan hero into someone who's evil. How we get from brave Macbeth in the first scene to the dead butcher and his fiend-like queen. That's the great transformation that occurs here. And it's a kind of corruption by supernatural forces which gets him to strive for such a perfection that he becomes a murdering machine. Well, I got to stop here. We'll continue with this week from today. Have a great Thanksgiving, and we'll see you afterwards. Okay, my lecture today is based on a Chinese fortune cookie obtained at a local restaurant, which shall go nameless, but they're rumored to be famous for their scorpion bowls, though I wouldn't know anything about that. Anyway, it reads, "Life is either a daring adventure or nothing." That's Macbeth for you right there. Arguably the whole of Shakespearean tragedy, but particularly Macbeth, and we'll see that. Anyway, I want to begin with some more conventional political analysis of the play. It is a very negative portrait of monarchy as a form of government. Now, again, the standard line on the play, or at least a standard line on the play, is that it was a tribute to the new Scottish king, James I. I forgot to mention there's some added evidence for this, is James I was very interested in witchcraft and wrote a book on demonology. And again, I have to say that when James came to the throne, he became the new patron of Shakespeare's theater company. They went from being the Lord Chamberlain's men. They became the King's Men. You all remember their big hit, Louis Louis, from the 1560s. But there are reasons to see some kind of link between this play and James I. Still, I have the continuing problem that if it's a portrait of the king's homeland in Scotland, it seems to be a very negative one. And any negative aspects of kingship would have to be qualified by the fact that it presents this as Scottish kingship, and even, as we'll see, offers English kingship as an alternative and superior. Still, from what we've been seeing about kingship, this play once again highlights the fundamental problem with kingship, and that is succession. Kingship appears to offer a very simple solution to the political problem of succession. What do you do when the current government ends? You want a peaceful succession, and monarchy seems to offer this very simple formula that the eldest son of the reigning monarch becomes the next king. But that's precisely what doesn't happen in Macbeth. And indeed, Duncan seems to provoke a crisis by trying to name Malcolm as his successor, thereby provoking at least one of his thanes to kill Duncan in the hopes of becoming king. In the more fluid situation of the Scottish kingship, which appears to be an elective monarchy, Duncan makes precisely the wrong move. Now, this is one respect in which the English kingship is held up as superior within the terms of the play on page 76, Act 4, Scene 3, about line 154. We learn about the English king, the miracle-working Edward the Confessor, to spoken to the succeeding royalty, he leaves the healing benediction. With this strange virtue, we have the heavenly gift of prophecy. Now, this does make an interesting point about kingship, namely the effort to give it a sacred or sacramental quality. And this would be one way to try to stabilize a potentially fluid situation. If you can get an aura of sanctity about the kingship, then people will be more reluctant to disturb the orderly succession. And I think Shakespeare was very aware of this as a strategy within the English monarchs of his own day. They had become the head of the Church of England under Henry VIII. And there was a great effort within Shakespeare's day to give a kind of religious aura to the monarchy. I think Henry V suggests that Henry V certainly presents himself to his subjects as a Christian king, and we see him having a Te Deum sung after the Battle of Agincourt. And so this would be an effort to give a kind of stability to the kingship by giving it a sacramental quality. But the downside of that is illustrated in Macbeth with the desacralization of kingship. You can argue it's indeed the problem that Macbeth creates for himself. Duncan is a very saintly king. Unfortunately, that's about all he is. And he's a weak king precisely, it seems, because of his Christian disposition. And there's no question in the terms of the play that the murder of Duncan takes away the sanctity of kingship. If you look at page 33, this would be Act 2, Scene 3, about line 70. Almost the first thing Macduff says in response to the discovery of the dead Duncan is, "Most sacrilegious murder hath broke ope the Lord's anointed temple." So this act of regicide is seen as specifically sacrilegious. And even Macbeth, on the next page, 34, chimes in on this in, as I was saying last time, what may be a prepared speech, but he may realize in the course of delivering it contains a certain truth. So that this is still Act 2, Scene 3, about line 96. Macbeth says, "Renown and grace is dead." And one thing Macbeth will discover to his horror is that he has killed the goose that laid the golden egg. That by murdering the sainted King Duncan, he's taken the sanctity away from kingship, and therefore, to a large extent, has left himself vulnerable. Now, in the terms of the play, the sanctity of kingship it does appear to be presented as a myth. That is, the play does not suggest that a divine being actually intervenes on the behalf of kings to preserve them. In fact, if that were true, Duncan wouldn't be murdered. In fact, quite the contrary. The play several times suggests that the special providence Hamlet speaks of may be available to sparrows, but not to ordinary human beings. So that on page 70, passage I read already. Lady Macbeth realizes that for all her piety, it's not going to help her. This is Act 4, Scene 3, about line 75. Whither should I fly? I have done no harm. Now that should be your defense in a world of divine providence. But I remember now I am in this earthly world where to do harm is often laudable, to do good sometime accounted dangerous folly. And when a murderer enters and says, "Where is your husband?" she says, "I hope in no place so unsanctified where such as thou mayst find him." This sentiment that there is no effective providence is bitterly echoed by Macduff on page 79, Act 4, Scene 3, so about line 223, when he hears of the slaughter of his wife and children, he says, "Did heaven look on and would not take their part?" That is an unanswered question in this play, and a very profound and disturbing question. Here as elsewhere in Shakespeare, that it does not seem, the world does not look obviously providential, where God takes care of good people and punishes evil people. In fact, often the opposite seems to happen, as Lady Macbeth suggests. And in general, in Shakespeare, the sanctity of kingship is spoken of and never proven. This is very strong in Richard II, who presents himself as God's king and therefore untouchable and ends up murdered, just the way Duncan does. So usurpers have a lot of success in Shakespeare, as they do in history. They often is following history in these cases. And so the notion that monarchy can be sustained by a sacred aura, it sounds great in theory, but doesn't work all that well in practice in these plays. There's a very interesting essay on this general subject by a critic named Franco Moretti, who's at Stanford. I believe it's called The Eclipse of Sovereignty. Here, Amazon let me down once looking it up, but it is in his book, Signs Taken for Wonders, and I'm pretty sure it's called The Eclipse of Sovereignty. Again, for those of you who are interested in the connections to contemporary politics in these plays, Moretti makes a very interesting argument of the overall impact of Elizabethan theater on the English nation, and he's not just talking about Shakespeare here. It's a simple fact that in 1649, the English executed the reigning monarch Charles II. Quite a shocking event, especially since it was presented as a legal act. He was put on trial and then executed for his crimes against the English nation. It's not that somebody just killed him, but this was presented as a legal act. No less than John Milton was charged with defending this regicide before the court of European public opinion. And Moretti effectively argues that Shakespeare's plays prepared for this. The eclipse of sovereignty is the way he puts it. I'll say the desacralization of kingship. But the net effect of watching all these plays, seeing kings deposed, seeing kings executed on stage, seeing them subject to all sorts of humiliations. And if you want to see humiliation, read Marlowe's Edward II. But Richard II would be a good example. King Lear would be a good example. Moretti argues that this was not without an effect. Monarchy was, in a sense, theater during this period. The kings and a queen like Elizabeth did try to maintain an aura by great theatrical events, pageants, various court appearances, and the appearance as divine, as raised above the ordinary human level, as untouchable. This was very important to the aura of kingship. And so when you had a theater, which often presented this and often was part and parcel of this process, again, the fact that Shakespeare's company was sponsored by King James, it was all part of maintaining that aura of being a grand monarch. Still, when what's being portrayed on the stage is kings killed, we referred to the deposition scene in Richard II, which was not allowed to be printed during Shakespeare's lifetime, though presumably it was staged, and we think that the Earl of Essex wanted it staged as a prelude to his rebellion against Elizabeth. That in some ways this was the emperor's new clothes, and quite often kings were stripped, literally stripped on the stage. It happens with King Lear, who ends up naked in the middle of the third act. And these constant reminders, the king is but a man. We saw that in Henry V. The cumulative effect of this was to run counter to this Elizabethan myth, this general myth of the divine support of monarchy. Anyway, it's a very good essay. I highly recommend it, and it's something to think about. There's so much effort to show how the Elizabethan theater was complicit in Elizabethan rule and then King James's rule, the Jacobean theater. But there's a good counter-argument to be made that the overall effect of the drama was subversive, that it's the equivalent of what television does now to show us our great rulers in all their foibles. And to kind of cut them down to size. In some ways, the Elizabethan theater was already doing that. So I think Macbeth is an interesting example of the demythologizing of kingship. It really ends up showing it as indistinguishable from criminality in the case of Macbeth. Now, I do want to say something against the unique demonization of Macbeth. That is, I've been trying to suggest that the problem for Duncan is these Thanes and not just Macbeth. And it's interesting that Macbeth and Banquo are mentioned at the beginning of the play, and perhaps Macduff as well, if he is in fact Bellona's bridegroom, which I believe increasingly he is. Then it seems we want to say there's one rotten apple in the barrel, and it's Macbeth. There's one evil Thane, and here's the wonderful Banquo and the wonderful Macduff. And that's certainly the surface appearance of the play, particularly at the end when we're talking of the dead butcher and his fiend-like queen. Nevertheless, the play makes some very interesting suggestions about Banquo and Macduff that suggests they're not all that goody-goody. Now, it's interesting that in the source, Banquo is a co-conspirator with Macbeth. This is on page 111, if you've got the signet. It's about 5 lines down, talking about the murder of Duncan. At length, therefore, communicating his, Macbeth's, purposed intent with his trusty friends, amongst whom Banquo was the chiefest, upon confidence of their promised aid, he slew the king at Inverness. So in the source, Banquo was in on the murder of Duncan. This is another reason why I have trouble with the idea that this play was a compliment to James because it was showing him descended from Banquo. Because Banquo in the Scottish sources is presented as a murderer. Now, Shakespeare does avoid that, does not present Banquo as a co-conspirator. Maybe that is an attempt to clean up the Banquo story to make the whole play more palatable to King James. People have argued that. Still, there's some very interesting touches to Banquo's characterization that show that the difference between him and Macbeth is not absolute, but they stand on some kind of continuum of evil. That if thoughts are evil, then Banquo is as evil as Macbeth. Page 24. This is the beginning of Act 2, so Act 2, Scene 1, about line 5. There he is with Flans. A heavy summons lies like head upon me, and yet I would not sleep. Now we know this is to be a characteristic of Macbeth, his sleeplessness. It's one of the signs of evil we see in Macbeth. Merciful powers, restrain in me the cursed thoughts that nature gives way to in repose. Well, what are those thoughts? Maybe just sort of general human evil, but as we soon learn, Banquo was thinking about the weird sisters. And the strong implication is that he is as tempted as Macbeth. Macbeth hears their prophecies and is tempted into killing Duncan to become king. Banquo knows that he's been promised something too. And this is what comes out, top of page 25. So about line 15 in the scene, this dialogue between Macbeth and Banquo, actually line 20. Well, I dreamt last night of the three weird sisters. To you they have showed some truth. The implication is, why not to me? And Macbeth very coyly says, I think not of them. Yet, when we can entreat an hour to serve, we would spend it in some words upon that business if you would grant the time. At your kindest leisure, if you shall cleave to my consent when 'tis, it shall make honor for you. So I lose none in seeking to augment it, but still keep my bosom franchised and allegiance clear, I shall be counseled. Good response the while, thanks, sir, the like to you. That's a marvelous exchange between two politicians, where there's a very strong undertext there, especially if we're thinking in terms of the sources where Banquo is a co-conspirator. Banquo is feeling out Macbeth here. You got something. You're Thane a quarter. Why haven't I gotten something? Macbeth says, play with me and maybe you will get something. And Banquo is very cagey here. Macbeth is very cagey here. But then if you turn to page 40, you'll see there, this is the opening of Act 3. Thou hast it now, king, quarter, gloms all, as the weird women promised, and I fear thou playedst most foully for it. Yet it was said it should not stand in thy posterity, but that I myself should be the root and father of many kings. If there come truth from them, as upon thee, Macbeth, their speeches shine, why, by the verities on thee made good, may they not be my oracles as well, and set me up at hope, but hush no more. Now, this almost makes Banquo a co-conspirator, legally an accessory after the fact. He clearly has suspicions here that Macbeth has killed Duncan, and he does not bring them forward, doesn't speak up, and the motive seems to be that he, like Macbeth, is invested in the prophecies. They promised him something very good, that he would be the root and father of many kings, and why, therefore, disturb this process that appears to be unfolding. In other words, Banquo is not guiltless, as Shakespeare presents him. He's not a totally innocent figure. In fact, you can begin to think, if the witches had promised the kingship immediately to Banquo and promised Macbeth, he would eventually sire kings. It's Banquo that might have killed Duncan. There are many gestures in the play that cut across the simple opposition between Macbeth on one side and Banquo, and I'll suggest Macduff on the other. These guys are thanes. They're all thanes. They're all thugs. I mean, they're all noble warriors, in fact. They're all Homeric heroes. They cannot be trusted. They're largely interested in their own ambition. And so I think who knows what would have happened if Banquo hadn't been killed. Who knows what would have happened if Macbeth had made some deal with him. Clearly, Shakespeare goes out of his way to suggest Banquo gets invested in whatever this process is going on in Scotland. Now, Macduff is a more heroic figure, and it's hard to spot him in activities as surreptitious as Banquo. But we do have the simple fact that Malcolm distrusts Macduff. And I'll speak briefly about the scene at the end of Act 4, Scene 3. This is another example of Shakespeare's handling of the fourth act problem. His plays reached a climax with the murder of Banquo in Act 3. We're going to have the denouement in Act 5 with Macbeth killed. We need something in between. Shakespeare comes up with, again, a mini-drama. This long exchange between Macduff and Malcolm, which is cut to pieces in productions. You will not see much of this in any People don't understand the logic of Shakespeare. He wants our emotions to calm down after the climax in the third act so we can get ready to be pumped up again for the fifth act. But in any case, I've noticed in all the movies I've watched, this thing gets cut entirely or cut to pieces. But we have here something like the quarrel between Brutus and Cassius and Julius Caesar, something like Act 4 of Hamlet and the Ophelia drama. We get really a very dramatic scene between Malcolm and Macduff, in which Malcolm at first pretends to be a potentially worse tyrant than Macbeth, and it is a test of Macduff. And it may surprise us that Malcolm is so distrustful of Macduff, but notice page 72, Act 4, Scene 3, about line 25, perchance even there where I did find my doubts, why in that rawness left you wife and child, those precious motives, those strong knots of love without leave-taking? I pray you, let not my jealousies be your dishonors, but mine own safeties. You may be rightly just, whatever I shall think. This is pretty strong, that Malcolm is very suspicious of Macduff because he is known to have abandoned his wife and children with what turns out to be disastrous consequences. And it does not seem to be the act of a gentle man, of a Christian man, of someone who cares about family. It seems like a Macbeth-like act or a tyrannical-like act. And so there are hints here that, you know, even Macduff may not be the perfect gentleman. Now, in the larger context of the play, it's particularly interesting because it shows something about Malcolm, that he has learned a lesson from his father's disaster. On page 75, this is Act 4, Scene 3, line 120, modest wisdom plucks me from over-credulous haste. Duncan's problem was he put too much faith in men like Cawdor. He was a gentleman on whom I'd built an absolute trust. It's very significant that Malcolm no longer has an absolute trust, and he's suspicious of the Thane of Fife, who deserted his wife. And it may be the most hopeful sign in this very dark play that Malcolm perhaps will offer the ideal that I showed you Hollinshead spoke of in the source of a combination of clemency and cruelty. Remember, Hollinshead said that Duncan had too much clemency and Macbeth had too much cruelty. And Malcolm, it suggests here, is going to be suspicious of the Thanes and maybe learn to control them. Now, this is particularly associated with the English here. And I do want to stress the oddness of the ending, which is a very a peculiar anglicizing of Scotland, the long-term English dream, which may be coming to an end even in your lifetimes. Scotland moves towards independence. Notice Macbeth's attitude towards the English. This is page 86, Act 5, Scene 3, about line 8. Then fly false thanes and mingle with the English epicures. I've never heard the English accused, for example, of their good taste in food. But here they're presented as epicures. And I think the idea is, you know, the Thanes are warlike, they're savage. The English are more pleasure-loving. I guess it's almost like Napoleon's idea of the English a nation of shopkeepers. But that is important in the connection with the play because England is presented as the more civilized land here, and do understand that Malcolm, to regain the Scottish throne, has made a deal with the English. On page 88, this is the opening of Act 5, Scene 4, cousins, and he's here with he's got a lot of English cousins. Cousins, I hope the days are near at hand that chambers will be safe. And there is that sense that what the English will bring to Scotland here is a domestication. as we've seen, the English are associated with a truly saintly king, with Edward the Confessor. They have a settled order of succession. Scotland is being presented as savage and barbaric here, and the calling in of the English will domesticate Scotland. This has been England's presentation of the situation for centuries. But do understand what's happening here. The play opens with a Norwegian invasion of Scotland, which is presented as bad. It ends with an English invasion of Scotland, which is presented as good. Now, it's a play written by an Englishman and presented for the English, though at a court presided over by a king from Scotland. But still, it's I want to call your attention to these strange moments in Shakespeare, as we saw in Hamlet, where the beginning, the worst thing that might possibly happen is a Norwegian invasion. At the end of the play, what's presented as salvation is the invasion of a Norwegian king, Fortinbras. And here, this play ends with Malcolm being restored to the throne, but only by virtue of English armies. And you can take a guess as to what the position of Scotland versus England will be after this. Scotland will be subordinated to England. There's even a strange touch at the end. This is page 97, so Act 5, Scene 8, where, it's about line 62, where Malcolm announces, "My thanes and kinsmen henceforth be earls, the first that ever Scotland in such an honor named." I'd like to offer this as the culminating Anglicization of Scotland here. You see from the beginning, the problem is thanes. Thane is an Old English word, in fact, roughly corresponding to what we mean by baron. These thanes are warlords, they're leaders of their own armies. The conversion of them to earls suggests something more like the system that emerged under the Tudor regime under Henry VII and Henry VIII, where the nobles were subordinate to the king and started to derive their power from them. Scotland begins this play with an elective monarchy where it seems the thanes get together to choose the king. I think the end suggests that the king now creates the earls. Now this is in the source. You can see it on page 119 if you got the signet, where indeed Holinshead talks about this around the middle of the page on 119. Immediately after his coronation, he called a parliament and forfeited. This is now Malcolm, in which he rewarded them with lands and livings that had assisted him against Macbeth, advancing them to fees and offices as he saw cause, and commanded that especially those that bear the surname of any officer's lands should have and enjoy the same. He created many earls, lords, barons, and knights, many of them that before were thanes, were at this time made earls. Shakespeare really read these sources carefully, and this does seem to register. And here, Macbeth fits into a pattern you can see throughout Shakespeare. The way to a stable, centralized monarchy is civil war, and the destruction and the process of all the independent nobles. This is exactly the process that Shakespeare portrays in his history plays. You can already be seeing in Henry V, but really the Wars of the Roses in the three Henry VI plays and Richard III. By the time you get to Henry Richmond, who becomes Henry VII and the founder of the Tudor line, so many nobles have been killed off in the civil wars that it becomes possible to establish a central monarchy. That was indeed the Tudor solution, especially under Henry VIII. Most of the established aristocratic families have been killed off in all this internecine warfare, and Henry took the titles, and in particular took church land he seized, and endowed and created new lords, and now their power flowed from the monarchy rather than being independent. And you see something of that process here. It's in some ways a very Machiavellian idea. The last man standing becomes the king. and has a much more stable position now because you don't have all these independent nobles. The Thanes, I think, are representative of that. So I think the play fits into a lot of political ideas that are common in Shakespeare and that are illustrated in histories as well. The one last general point I'd like to make is on the issue of religion and politics, which will then take us back to the story of Macbeth. Again, I've been trying to show you that religion is a very problematic aspect of politics in Shakespeare's Christian world. That Christianity is a new factor in politics that was not there in the ancient world of Coriolanus and possibly is just being introduced in the world of Antony and Cleopatra. But Duncan is an example of Machiavelli's point, his concern that Christianity is making modern regimes weak. We saw that at the very beginning of the course in looking at the discourses. And Duncan is a truly weak king because of his unwarlike character. I'm probably making too much of this, but I still can't get over his opening words. What bloody man is that? I mean, like, you know, Duncan, it's a battle. There's going to be blood. But there's a strong sense there, I feel, that, you know, sort of, I wish we could have battles without blood. Why do people have to get so bloody? So bloody, as the English would say. And that sense of his distaste for the king's warrior-like role. Again, he is not leading his troops, and all his problems flow from the fact that the Thanes are winning the battles and Duncan's standing on the sideline and thinking, I'll give him a few titles and that will satisfy them. So this is a theme, again, that runs throughout Shakespeare. It's there at the very beginning. The Henry VI plays are very much like this, and as I said, Henry VI is characterized very much the way Duncan is. You even have York saying to him the same thing that I showed you, one of the sources, that you deserve to be in church. You don't deserve to be running a country. Now, when I raise this issue of Christianity and politics, I'm broadly speaking placing Shakespeare in the movement we call the Enlightenment. He's a little early for that. The Enlightenment's a late 17th, 18th century phenomenon. But what I'm claiming about Shakespeare here, I just want to say, is not all that unusual, and probably most of you accept the idea of keeping religion out of politics. We have, as a very established principle in this country, the separation of church and state, and the kind of phenomena Shakespeare is looking at are exactly why we do. And there was a critique of the religious impact on politics that in many ways begins with Machiavelli, but is continued by many people who were very different from Machiavelli in other respects. In some ways, Christianity intrudes in politics and makes people weaker, less willing to pursue war. On the other hand, it creates new religious motives for warfare, which can make it even more savage. The Crusades, strictly speaking, ended around the beginning of the 13th century, but it's interesting how strong a presence the Crusades still have in Shakespeare, and this was this monumental religious effort to enroll politics in a religious motive to recapture the Holy Land from the Muslims. We saw this even at the end of Henry V, where Henry V is still locked in, anachronistically it turns out, into a crusading motive. He talks about going to Constantinople and winning it back from the Turks. In fact, the Turks hadn't won Constantinople at that time yet, but still it's a crusading idea, as it turns out. You read the Henry IV plays, Henry V's father proposed a crusade, wanted to go to the Holy Land, and Richard II, at the very beginning, when a man is banished, he talks about going on a crusade. That phenomenon was still very much in the background in Europe, a Europe which was still involved in warfare against the Turks, as we see in the story of Cyprus in Othello, and even more strongly, by Shakespeare's day, religious warfare had broken out within Europe over the division between Protestants and Catholics. And this was very strong in England. Henry VIII had taken the country Protestant. Then under his daughter Mary, the country had become Catholic again. And then under Elizabeth, the country had become Protestant again. And each time they made this switch, a lot of people got burned. There's a big debate of who burned more, the Catholics or the Protestants, but there's a lot of burning of heretics. And of course, you'd had the Spanish Armada, 1588, an attempt by the Spanish Catholics and in general the Habsburg Catholics to reimpose Catholicism on England. So religion had begun to emerge as a very potent force and a very destructive force in politics, culminating in the 30 Years' War in the 17th century that destroyed somewhere between half and maybe 60% of the population of Central Europe. And there was a general agreement among philosophers at this time that something had to be done about it. In some ways, when I say that Shakespeare is worried about the impact of religion on politics, this is the sort of thing he has in mind. It's something he very much had in common with the humanists of the day, figures like Rabelais' Gargantua and Pantagruel has an attack on the crusading spirit and presents crusading warfare as ridiculous and absurd. Men like Thomas More and Erasmus, it is interesting that they were so opposed to religious warfare that they did not side with Protestantism, even though intellectually they sympathized more with the Protestant position than the Catholic. Luther was very disappointed that men like Erasmus would not come to his side, but they sensed that the division within the Catholic Church, Catholic means universal, in Greek, within the church that had been universal in Western Europe, that this would lead to warfare. And Thomas More went to his death because he would not support Henry VIII's taking England Protestant, believed that the impulse here on the part of these humanists was that they saw the horrors of Catholic Protestant warfare coming to Europe. And again, I think Shakespeare participates in that when he worries about the impact of religion on politics. Cervantes, the great contemporary of Shakespeare, this is what Don Quixote is all about. It's an attack on the crusading spirit and the mixing up of religion and politics. So in this, Shakespeare fits into a very broad movement at the time. I've been making some very specific arguments about what goes on in his plays. I just wanted to pause and suggest that this is by no means unique to Shakespeare, and indeed everywhere you look in his day, you're seeing people very concerned about the heating up of politics based on religious disputes, and above all, doctrinal disputes within Christianity, but still the disputes between Christians and Muslims that led to all the naval warfare in the Mediterranean in the 16th century. So, I've been calling Hamlet, Othello, and Macbeth Christian plays. Again, I'm reluctant to classify them as such, but still, it's really, when you step back from these plays, in one way or another, they're all about the dangers of orienting political life by the supernatural. That's very strong in Macbeth and Hamlet. You have two figures who change what they do politically because they've had a kind of revelation. The other world is speaking to them. Othello's a little different until you begin to see that Iago is a demonic parody of a priest. What he does is to introduce Othello to these Christian truths about human depravity. He kind of becomes the evil twin of his father confessor. and what he gets Othello to see is into the depths of depravity of the human soul. Ironically, there are no depths of depravity in Desdemona, but Iago's trick is to make Iago think that, and he offers proofs as true as Holy Writ to him, as he puts it. If you look at these plays, they show how complicated political life becomes when it's oriented by the other world and by messages that come from the other world. What is the line? The supernatural soliciting cannot be ill, cannot be good. Hamlet says, this vision I have seen may be a devil. You just don't know when you start to be oriented by the supernatural, what you're living with. Now, I'd like to now go a little more deeply into Macbeth and what it means for him to be oriented by the supernatural. I think this is the deepest aspect of the play, and Shakespeare really shows a profound transformation of Macbeth's consciousness here. And I think we can best understand it in light of what we traced in the Roman plays, which is, again, one reason I began this course with them, even though Shakespeare wrote two of them after Macbeth. And that is, Macbeth goes from a belief in human agency to a belief in human passivity. That is, at the start of the play, he is a hero in the classical sense. As we saw, he's disdaining fortune. He really believes that his fate is in his hands as a warrior. That's the meaning of being the warrior that he is. And yet what we see develop in the play as a result of the encounter with the witches is a tremendous passivity in Macbeth. This is page 12, Act 1, Scene 3, about line 143. If chance will have me king, why chance may crown me without my stir. That's a transformation here. We talked about this in connection with the Roman plays. Remember, in Coriolanus, there were no soothsayers, even though in Shakespeare's source there are some. There were no omens and oracles, and Coriolanus said, fortune is for the followers, it's not for the flyers. And again, his principle is God helps those who help themselves. And we saw the gradual intrusion of soothsayers and prophecies until in the world of Antony and Cleopatra, the characters were starting to believe in destiny and that things were out of their hands. And that whole sense of moving from a world of active citizens in a republic to these passive subjects of an empire is really what Shakespeare charts in the Roman plays. Well, we see something similar here in Macbeth. It starts with his, if chance will have me king, and chance will cry, I don't have to do anything. But the real transformation is when he decides, well, I got to get on the side of destiny. And that's what I want to focus on here, what happens politically when you start to think you're destined, that there's a kind of current of history that's behind you. It's the source of Macbeth's tyranny. And that's what I find most extraordinary about the play, that Shakespeare seems to intuit something about tyranny in the modern world, that it's going to take the form of men of destiny. I don't know how far to push this, but when you think of Napoleon and you think of Hitler and you think of Stalin and other of the modern tyrants, they all had this sense that they were part of they were men of destiny, they were the wave of the future. I don't know how Shakespeare foresaw this, but I think somehow he did. And what's most peculiar about it is that it is a transformation of a Christian principle, and specifically it involves taking the idea of heaven and now searching for heaven on earth. And that, of course, is the principle of Macbeth's famous soliloquy, which we've looked at already, but I want to look at it again. This is pages 20 to 21, Act 1, Scene 7. If it were done, when 'tis done, then 'twere well it were done quickly. If the assassination could trammel up the consequence and catch with his surceased success, that but this blow might be the be-all and the end-all here, but here upon this bank and shoal of time, we jump the life to come. Now, as I said to you last time, this is not a rejection of the afterlife. This is an attempt to embrace the afterlife in the here and now, to find the be-all and the end-all. That's something infinite and absolute. It's what in Christianity would be associated with heaven and the afterlife. But Macbeth wants it here and now. But this blow might be the be-all and end-all here, but here upon this bank and shoal of time, we jump the life to come. In a weird way, this has become the formula of modern tyrannies, the attempt to have heaven on earth. And you see this in the great modern ideological tyrannies. You see it in Nazism, you see it in communism. They were all, in one way or another, an attempt to secularize the Christian promise of heaven or of a perfect life, to find it in the here and now. That's what Nazism offered. That's what communism offered. And there are a lot of very serious analyses of the ideology of totalitarianism, of both communism and fascism, that see them in these terms. And Shakespeare seems to grasp that here. And in particular, what I want to concentrate on is the peculiar effect of having Macbeth focus on the future, his obsession with the future, and therefore his enormous devaluation of the present. This is the nature of his, I almost said the Nietzsche, but this is the nature of his transformation. You see it in both Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. If you look at page 18, this is Act 1, Scene 5, about line 56. Thy letters, this is Lady Macbeth speaking of Macbeth, thy letters have transported me beyond this ignorant present, and I feel now the future in the instant. I want to focus on that. That is the fundamental transformation in the consciousness of both Lady Macbeth and Macbeth. They now talk about the ignorant present. They talk about contempt with the present. In the future, they will be king and queen. And they know it because they've gotten this prediction from the witches. And, you know, the prediction about Thane of Quarters come true. And so you see the idea now, the present is ignorant. Other people don't know what the future is going to be. And there's this real contempt. Present's worthless. I feel now the future in the instant. That's the equivalent of the be-all and the end-all, but here, upon this bank and shoal of time. Again, I want to show they are reaching for something that Christianity promises way off in the future. You know, Christianity introduces the idea of a last judgment, for example, and that haunts the play. If you turn to page 33, for example, this is Macduff speaking. It's Act 2, Scene 3, about line 80. Up and see the great doom's image. That's just an image of the last judgment, but it shows how thinking about the present is governed by the idea of the last judgment. And then page 65, Act 4, Scene 1, Macbeth speaking. Act 4, Scene 1, about line 117. What really upsets him in the vision of Banquo's descendants is a fourth. Start eyes, what will the line stretch out to the crack of doom? Again, you see here how these characters are haunted by this new idea of an apocalypse, of an end of time, and the great temptation for Macbeth is to speed up the process. But here, upon this bank and shoal of time, I want it, and I want it now. I want heaven on earth now. And again, this is so curiously anticipatory of the kinds of ideologies you get in the 19th and 20th century that in one way or another promise heaven on earth. There's a curious critique of this on page 31. So Act 2, Scene 3, the marvelous Porter's speech, the guy who thinks he's guarding Hellmouth here, and indeed is. I could spend a whole lecture just going through this speech, but look at the top of page 31, so it's about line 4 and 5 in Act 2, Scene 3. Here's a farmer that hanged himself on the expectation of plenty. Now, as your notes point out, farmers would hoard food expecting a bad harvest and thinking the price of food would go up and they'd make a killing, and sometimes the harvest would turn good and there'd be an abundance and the price of food would go down. That's the farmer who hangs himself in the expectation of plenty. But this whole speech, and maybe I can come back to it, is filled with images of Macbeth and what's wrong with Macbeth. And ultimately, Macbeth is someone who hanged himself in the expectation of plenty, who destroyed himself in the expectation of the infinite, of having the be-all and the end-all here upon this bank and show of time. He wants that, and yet he destroys himself in the hope that there is an infinite. We've been seeing this since Antony and Cleopatra. Shakespeare presents the truly ancient world, the world of Coriolanus, as a finite world, as a world of finite desires, finite goals. Coriolanus ain't about to give up the whole world for Virgilia. That's part and parcel of his life in Rome, his marriage. It makes him a citizen of Rome. But Antony and Cleopatra, they're expecting new heaven and new earth. Eternity is in their eyes. They want the infinity. It's the thing that's haunted all these characters we've been looking at. Hamlet, Othello, in a weird way now Macbeth. This desire for something infinite, that you could have it all. You could have perfection. And it's always been shadowed by the sense that if you don't have perfection, you have nothing. That's why I read you that fortune cookie. And I'll remind you of Macbeth's line, to be thus is nothing, but to be safely thus. All this culminates in his most famous speech on page 90, the Tomorrow and Tomorrow speech. So this is Act 5, Scene 5, about line 16. One of the most famous speeches in all of Shakespeare. I want to concentrate on the peculiar time sense in this speech. So this is about line 19, page 90. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day to the last syllable of recorded time. It's again a Christian idea. There's no last syllable of recorded time in the ancient view of the world. The ancient view of time was cyclical. And not apocalyptic as this is here. And all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. Out, out, brief candle. Life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. What you see here is the way Macbeth's nihilism grows out of his apocalyptic expectations. And I want to particularly focus on the fact that this speech refers to tomorrow and to yesterday and never to today. And indeed, this is what drops out of Macbeth's world today. Today is merely the ignorant present. He is haunted by tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. He is haunted by these expectations of this future perfection. We have seen it's what drives him again and again in the play. I'll kill Duncan and then things will be perfect. Oops, there's Banquo and Fleance. I'll kill Banquo and then things will be perfect. Oops, Fleance escapes. Well, let's start killing everybody in Scotland It's a frightening anticipation of the logic of modern tyrannical regimes. Men like Hitler and Stalin and Mao and Pol Pot. The sense that perfection is somehow associated with the extermination of other human beings because they're so messy. They mess up your lives. But here we have, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow to the last syllable of recorded time. And then we have yesterdays, but what we don't have is today. And indeed, this is the profoundest sense in which Macbeth does kill the goose that lays the golden egg. He kills today. He kills living in the present, where human beings ultimately enjoy things. You can think back to some food you had yesterday. You can think ahead to some dinner you're having tomorrow. But the dinner you actually eat, that's the real pleasure. And here you see the present drops out here, and it leads him to this notion of nothingness here, signifying nothing. What did the fortune cookie say? I've got it here. I know it had it exactly right. Yes, life is either a daring adventure or nothing. We've seen this all or nothing attitude in a lot of these characters. We've seen it in both Othello and Hamlet in their attitude towards women. They're either angels or they're whores. There's nothing in between. There's either perfection or nothing. And now we see that on almost a metaphysical scale in Macbeth, that his quest was for the be-all and the end-all here, but he never found it, and the result is it's a tale told by an idiot full of sound and fury signifying nothing. Indeed, what Shakespeare shows about Macbeth and Lady Macbeth is the self-destructive character of their desire. In some ways, this is a classic portrait of desire here. The tyrant is associated with desire. The man who desires the crown so much that he will kill for it, that he'll kill the legitimate ruler or the legitimate heir. Moreover, he does so to be able to fulfill his desires. And this is the way Lady Macbeth presents the tyrannical life. Page 22, this is Act 1, Scene 7. This is what she challenges Macbeth with, about line 39. Art thou afeared to be the same thing in thine own act and valor as thou art in desire? That's almost the definition of the tyrant and tyrannical desire. It's that you let nothing stand between you and your desires. But again, here's where the porter supplies such a marvelous critique of Macbeth. Page 31. Again, in the speech, it's the bottom of page 31, about line 30 in Act 2, Scene 3, when he talks about drink, because he's been drinking a lot and everybody's been drinking a lot. And he says that drink provokes three things: marry, sir, nose painting, sleep, and urine. Lechery, sir, it provokes and unprovokes. It provokes the desire, but it takes away the performance. And that would have been a good lesson for Macbeth to hear, because he has all these desires, but when he seems to fulfill them, it takes away the performance. He finds, indeed, that his life is worthless as a tyrant. Look at page 86, Act 5, Scene 3. I read you about line 20. I read you this bit already. This push will cheer me ever or deceit me now. There it is again. That's that all or nothing attitude. But now he realizes I've lived long enough. My way of life has fallen to the sear, the yellow leaf, and that which should accompany old age is honor, love, obedience, troop of friends. I must not look to have, chiefly because he's killed them all. But in their stead, curses not loud but deep, mouth, honor, breath, which the poor heart would fain deny and dare not. And this is, in a way, this is Shakespeare's greatest portrait of the tyrant. He had attempted it earlier in Richard III, Macbeth is a more profound shot at it. The tyrant who seems like an ideal, the man who has everything and who wins it by virtue of his own efforts. In many ways, Machiavelli's doctrines are a praise of the tyrant and tyranny and what the tyrant can accomplish. But here we see the emptiness of it, something that Lady Macbeth formulates on page 46, Act 3, Scene 2, about line 4. Nought's had, all spent, where desire is got without content. 'Tis safer to be that which we destroy than by destruction dwell in doubtful joy. And that notion of desire is got without content. And again, it provokes and unprovokes the desire. That turns out to be what's so problematic about tyranny. You destroy the very thing you sought for. Just as I said, Macbeth destroys kingship in the very process of attaining it. By his act of usurpation, he takes away what made kingship attractive in the first place. Namely, you're this wonderful man that everybody looks up to, and you're secure on the throne. This is a problem of all usurpers, that they've taken away the aura of kingship, and they make it all too easy for someone to usurp from them. And so we do have this strong sense in Macbeth. Insecurity, that is what he was seeking, the most perfect security. And the witches seem to give him the promise of that. And yet that's precisely what he does not get. Now the dialogue between Malcolm and Macduff has a great deal of discussion of the nature of the tyrant as Malcolm tries to portray himself as a potential tyrant. But it seems to me the key line is on page 73. So this is Act 4, Scene 3, about line 66, where Macduff says, boundless intemperance in nature is a tyranny. And flip-flopping the notion here, the tyrant seems to be the man who gets to have everything he desires. But what Macduff is saying is boundless desire is a tyranny. That the tyrant becomes enslaved to his own desires, that he is not the free man. The tyrant presents himself as the freest of men, the man who is not bound by the ordinary limitations of humanity, who wanted the kingship and just took it. And yet what we see here is boundless intemperance in nature is a tyranny. That very boundless desire serves as a tyranny over your soul. And so that's what we see in both Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, that what is presented as an act of self-assertion and the achievement of their desires turns them into automata. They become the slaves of their own desire and their own act. And Shakespeare images this very powerfully in the play in terms of action without sight. Macbeth believes he has been given foresight, that he's had the wonderful advantage of seeing ahead of time what his fate, his future will be, and it allows him to pursue it. The witches have allowed him, as he puts it, to see into the seeds of time. But in fact, what Shakespeare shows is the blindness of Macbeth and of Lady Macbeth, and there's a very strong set of images for this. You can see it beginning on page 15. This is Act 1, Scene 5, the first of many invocations. So Act 1, Scene 5, about line 50, page 15. Stars, hide your fires, let not light see my black and deep desires. The eye winketh the hand, yet let that be which the eye fears what it has done to see. Here he invokes darkness, that he might not see what he's going to do. And indeed, ironically, this is what happens. He does not see what he's doing, which is to say he does not understand the full consequences of murdering Duncan. Now, Lady Macbeth shares this with him. You just turned to page 17. Very similar invocation. So Act 1, Scene 5, line 51. Lady Macbeth says, "Come, thick night, and pall thee in the dunnest smoke of hell, that my keen knife see not the wound it makes, nor heaven peep through the blanket of the dark to see, hold." They are both asking to act in darkness. On a conscious level, they're claiming we're acting with perfect comprehension of what we're doing. This is an assertion of our freedom. We will get what we desire. You want to be king, so you kill the sitting king, and you become king. And yet in the very act of talking about it, they talk about acting blindly in darkness. Look at page 56. So this is Act 3, Scene 4. As we begin to see the transformation in Macbeth here, about line 136, Act 3, Scene 5, "I'm in blood, stepped in so far, that should I wade no more, returning were as tedious as go o'er. Strange things I have it that will to hand, which must be acted ere they may be scanned." Again, this is a man who contemplated his actions. We see how much thought he puts into killing Duncan. "If it be done, when 'tis done, then 'twere well it were done quickly. The assassination could trammel up the consequences and catch with his surcease success." He's thinking about it. He's going through the potential consequences. Unfortunately, he doesn't fully think them through and goes ahead and kills Duncan, and he gradually becomes trapped. That's what I'm getting at. He becomes a slave to the logic of tyranny. It seems to be an assertion of freedom, the ultimate action of a Superman. I'm beyond good and evil, I can kill the king, no problem. What we see is how that draws him into a series of acts where the actions escalate and the thought obliterates. He still gives some thought before he kills Banquo. He almost consults Lady Macbeth on it. But this is the transformation here, where he realizes he's lost his freedom. He has entered into a process that is ballooned out of control. "I'm in blood, stepped in so far, that should I wade no more, returning were as tedious as go o'er." There's no turning back now. "And strange things I haven't had that will to hand, which must be acted ere they may be scanned." This is the opposite of "if it were done when it is done." Early in the play, Macbeth scans the action before doing it. But now, essentially, what he's saying is that he's not even going to think anymore. He's just going to react. He's just going to kill people, and we'll see how it turns out, and we'll think about it later. You know, it's shoot, ask questions later. And you see it on page 66. This is Act 4, Scene 1, line 143. "Time, thou anticipates my dread exploits. The flighty purpose ne'er is o'ertook, unless the deed go with it. From this moment the very firstlings of my heart shall be the firstlings of my hand, and even now to crown my thoughts with acts, be it thought and done." By the way, this is a kind of vision of divine omnipotence, that you could just think something that would happen. The only person of whom that's true is the God of the revealed religions. But in any case, no thinking. Act first, think later. Now, the ultimate image of this in the play is Lady Macbeth sleepwalking. Incredibly powerful scene. It's Act 5, Scene 1, but one which above all presents the metaphorical culmination of everything that she and Macbeth have been invoking, namely to act in darkness, to act without thinking, as we hear on page 81, line 10 in Act 5, Scene 1, "A great perturbation in nature, to receive at once the benefit of sleep and do the effects of watching." And indeed, what she learns here is page 83, line 71, what's done cannot be undone. Earlier in the play, she said, a little water clears up as this deed. Now she says, line 53, all the perfumes of Arabia will not sweeten this little hand. Again, she thought that they were free. Now she learns they are captives of this process that they've set in motion. Now, part of it is that they have in effect destroyed the whole world of nature here. They've entered into this supernatural soliciting and pursued this process. It is a tremendous assertion of egotism on their parts. You see that in Macbeth. Turn to page 46. This is bottom of 46. It's Act 3, Scene 2, about line 15. But let the frame of things disjoined, both the worlds suffer, ere we will eat our meal in fear. What an incredible claim that is. This is not minor league aspiration here. This is where I talk about, the desire for the infinite and the absolute. Macbeth is willing to see the very frame of things disjoined, and both the worlds suffer. And I believe your note is right that means the afterlife and this life, heaven and earth. Ere we will eat our meal in fear. This is a strong motif that Shakespeare shows in Macbeth, page 56. This is Act 3, Scene 4, about line 136. For mine own good all causes shall give way. And what an incredible claim of egotism here, and so characteristic especially of the modern tyrant. Again, think Hitler, think Stalin, think Mao here, that somehow the claims to being special, to being singled out, justify all sorts of murder, the whole disruption of the world. Hitler particularly with his idea of wanting to bring down the whole world of Germany in April of 1945. If he was going to die, the whole of his world should die with him. Macbeth's extraordinary speech on page 62, Act 4, Scene 1, about line 50, when he comes to the witches again to be assured about the future, what he says to them is, this is line 52, though you untie the winds and let them fight against the churches, though the yeasty waves confound and swallow navigation up, though bladed corn be lodged and trees blown down, though castles topple on their warders' heads, though palaces and pyramids do slope their heads to their foundations, though the treasure of nature's Germans tumble altogether, even till destruction sicken, answer me to what I ask you. There could not be a more absolute demand here. He contemplates the destruction of just about everything here, and even of nature itself. As your notes point out, Germans are, they're not a bunch of people from Berlin. It's the seeds of all life here. And there is a sense in which his crime is ultimately a crime against nature. It's for one thing a crime against generation. You see this, that Lady Macbeth early on does not seem to be the best of mothers here, where she asked to be unsexed on page 17, and later with Lady Macbeth, the most famous passage on bottom of page 22, so Act 1, Scene 7, line 54. I've given suck and know how tender 'tis to love the babe that milks me. I would, while it was smiling in my face, have plucked my nipple from his boneless gums and dashed the brains out, had I so sworn as you have done to this. What an extraordinary passage that is, and the idea of your mother who would destroy her own nursing child. Remember, this is the curse of Macbeth. His great worry about Banquo is that Banquo will inherit the future. That Banquo will be the one who sires future kings, and this is page 42, Act 3, Scene 1, line 60. They hailed him father to a line of kings. Upon my head they placed a fruitless crown and put a barren scepter in my grip, thence to be wrenched with an unlineal hand, no son of mine succeeding. If it be so, for Banquo's issue have I filed my mind. For them the gracious Duncan have I murdered. This is indeed his problem: fruitlessness, barrenness. He's become king, but he will not be succeeded. Of course he won't be succeeded. He's destroyed the process of succession. And he's got a wife who would murder the children. I mean, this is not the greatest domestic household ever portrayed here. These are, Lady Macbeth speaks of murdering her own child. Macbeth has murdered sleep. Great nature's bomb, as it's called in the play. They have murdered nature. Indeed, ultimately, they see nature as their great opponent. Because nature sets limits to human beings. It sets limits to their desires, for example. And ultimately, you can see Macbeth's great enemy is nature. And what he embraces is supernature, the supernatural, that somehow that will give him perfection and will give him the absolute. It turns out, in fact, to be the source of his faith in the very prophecies of the witches. If you turn to page 64, we'll have to examine this a little more next time, but just to start setting this up, what do they promise him that makes him feel so confident? Macbeth shall never vanquished be until great Birnam Wood to high Dunsinane Hill shall come against him. And what does he say? This is page 64 at 4 Scene 1. That will never be. Who could impress the forest, bid the tree unfix his earthbound root? Sweet Bodemans, good. Rebellious dead rise never, till the wood of Burnham rise, and our high place Macbeth shall live the lease of nature. It's a curious faith in nature that misleads him. He who wishes to be exempt from nature, who's willing to see all nature's germs tumble together, who has contempt for the natural order, nevertheless ultimately relies on it. No forest is ever going to come to attack him. He doesn't think of the obvious stratagem that Malcolm thinks of there. So it's as if he assumes everyone but him is exempt, that only he is exempt from nature. Only he as the tyrant can stand above nature. Everyone else, everything else in the world will follow the rules of nature. Trees don't move. He obviously hasn't seen Lord of the Rings. And he's safe because there's an order of nature out there, even as he constantly thinks of violating that order of nature himself in all these unnatural acts, which again and again are directed against the generative power of nature, which are directed against children. His greatest crime is murdering the children of Macduff. We see a very poignant little child destroyed in the process, and Macbeth himself is denied that. So Shakespeare has an extraordinary vision in this play when he sees a new form of tyranny that would be directed against nature itself, that would see nature as somehow imperfect, and human will as being able to create something more perfect than nature. Shakespeare sees that as a very dangerous possibility here. Okay, I covered a lot of what I wanted to say about Macbeth. I'll finish up next time. There's obviously more to say about the play, but we should have a good amount of time next time. So do certainly raise any questions you have specifically about the final. But more generally, I hope that you've been saving up questions and we can talk more about some of those next time. Just so we're all clear on this, the exam is on Friday, December 21st at 9 a.m. and it's in Segis South, SO10. I'm glad I checked. I thought it was going to be in this room. That's the way we do it at the University of Virginia, but I looked it up. And so anyway, that's where we'll be. And I'll remind you, according to the Mayan calendar, the world ends on December 21st. Harvard says if the world ends, you still have only 24 hours to finish the exam. So we'll get through it somehow. If anyone wanted a hard copy of the final exam format, I've got some here. Otherwise, you all have it. And let me stress that these samples are genuine samples. The IDs will not be arcane or designed to trick you. They will be substantial passages that you should be able to recognize. And similarly, the questions will be directed towards what the course has been about. They're not going to be trick questions. I'm pitching them right down the middle of the plate. Swing away, don't bunt. And then we'll have time to talk about the exam. I'm not going to spend the whole time lecturing. As we're coming to a close here, I should be correcting all the historical errors I've made over the semester. But one thing I mentioned that the English executed Charles II last time. Was Charles I they executed. James I, Charles I, Charles II, James II. And they would have executed James III, but he didn't get to the throne. But anyway, so Charles I. And also I discovered recently in proofreading a book review that I misspelled Lord Burleigh's name. That's how it's correctly spelled. I was spelling it Leigh. Not that that's all that important. We have 6 or 7 authentic signatures from Shakespeare, and I believe he spells his name differently each time. The Elizabethans didn't have dictionaries, and they weren't big on spelling. Which reminds me that my Libyan cab driver in New York asked me to tell you that Gaddafi pronounced the name of our author, William Shakespeare, and claimed that he was an Arab. Anyway, the cab driver thought this was going to crack you guys up, but that's why he's a cab driver in New York instead of being a former minister of defense, no doubt. Anyway, that was my main profit from going to New York this week. As we're coming to a close here, 2 acknowledgments I do want to make. Bill County has been my roadie here, my techie, and has done a great job recording this. We do hope that this will be made available online eventually on the Comedy Channel or the Toon Network or Adult Swim, no doubt. But anyway, as you know, he's also helped my voice get through the semester. Fortuitously, Professor Harvey Mansfield's not here today, so I can thank him. Just do understand, he was the one who raised the money for bringing me here through his program on constitutional government. He blushes so terribly that I could not have said this if he were here. So anyway, and Andrew Zwick very much helped raise the money, and I highly recommend the program on constitutional government. It brings all sorts of interesting speakers to Harvard, even me. So again, I would be very remiss. At least we've recorded that for the television camera, and now he won't even know I said it. All right, what I hope to do now is speak for about a half hour, 40 minutes, winding up on Macbeth, and then you can ask me questions about the final or any questions you have about the course or about Shakespeare. I've been offering you Macbeth as Shakespeare's portrait of the tyrant, and I want to examine that a little more fully today. We've considered various forms of government in Shakespeare, aristocratic republic, commercial republic, monarchy, tyranny is a form of government, and Shakespeare apparently doesn't like it. He gives very negative portraits of tyranny. His first extensive portrait of tyranny really is in the play Richard III, but Macbeth is his greatest portrait of a tyrant. I should say that this Greek word tyrannos, from which we derive our word tyranny, was originally a more neutral word. Tyrannos simply referred to how you got to power. And someone who was not born to the throne, but got there by his own efforts, which often involved killing the current occupant of the throne, was called a tyrannos. And there was, in fact, an age of tyrants in Athens in the 6th century. And at first, people thought tyranny was a great new form of government. Because along the lines of Machiavelli's argument for illegitimate princes, the tyrannoi, that's the Greek plural for tyrants, the tyrants were often very accomplished rulers. They did great things for their city because they needed to shore up their rule. So, for example, Pisistratus, the great 6th century BC tyrant in Athens, he may very well be the one who created the Athenian theater. He may very well be the one who first had the Homeric poems written down. He established a lot of great institutions in Athens. Many of these tyrants were very effective rulers. Again, the point being they couldn't rest on their laurels. They'd had to fight to get to the throne. They were very energetic rulers. However, after a while, people began to notice that tyrants behaved tyrannically. That, for example, they surrounded themselves with bodyguards, that they were feeling insecure and executed their opponents. And gradually the word tyrant came to take on its modern negative connotations. And a lot of the most interesting political writings of the ancient Greek world are about tyranny. Xenophon's dialogue, The Hero, which is a dialogue about whether it's good to be a tyrant or not. And of course, Plato's Republic, as I suggested, one of the potential paper topics, has a very interesting section in books 8 and 9 on the tyrant. You have to understand that initially, tyranny seemed like a viable option. I mean, in the 6th century, a mother in Athens could say, gee, I really hope my little boy grows up to be a tyrant. But as they gradually people began to realize the defects of this form of government, and it's very much what Shakespeare portrays in Macbeth, that the tyrant, by destroying the very principle of legitimacy, becomes radically insecure as a ruler. And so we see Macbeth getting involved in increasing murders, becoming the bloody butcher that people come to take him for. And indeed, it's a very interesting story in this sense that Macbeth seems initially to be a decent man, both in the sense that he's admired in the community and admired for his military prowess, and that we see he has very strong compunctions initially about killing Duncan, so much so that he almost doesn't do it. What we see in the course of the play is tyranny producing the tyrant. Another way in which a form of government shapes character, that Macbeth becomes the worse for having chosen the path of tyranny. And we see him getting nastier and nastier. So by the end of the play, he's almost unrecognizable. But what I'd like to focus on, and this is going to be very speculative today, is the question of Macbeth, what makes him distinctive as a tyrant. And I want to suggest that somehow he is a kind of modern tyrant, and not an ancient tyrant, and the worse for it. He seems so unusually bloody as a tyrant. Now, in the ancient world, again, tyranny was a fairly common political form. The tyrant was always thought of as a man who ruled in his own interests, who essentially seizes the throne and then essentially perverts it to his own purposes. And that chiefly meant, in ancient terms, that the tyrant used his tyranny to indulge his desires. And we have an echo of that in Macduff's comment, boundless intemperance in nature is a tyranny, and the whole dialogue with Malcolm, in which the emphasis is on the tyrant's avarice and his luxuriousness. And indeed, the ancient tyrants were thought of as self-indulgent. This is very clear again in this dialogue by, I should get Xenophon's name on the board, Xenophon's hero, which is all about especially the tyrant's impulse to indulge his sexual desires. And we can use Antony and Cleopatra as our example of that in this course. Tyranny comes up in the Roman plays. Remember, the plebeians accuse Coriolanus of wanting to be a tyrant. Of course, the whole issue in Julius Caesar is whether Julius Caesar is a tyrant. But really, in Antony and Cleopatra, we see tyranny. The regime of Antony and Cleopatra is post-legitimate. It occurs after the dissolution of the Republic. Octavius is in the process of shaping a new legitimate regime, which will be the empire. But in the interim, essentially we have a kind of tyranny. And we see this above all in the way Antony and Cleopatra treat and abuse messengers. Beating the messenger. It's a very characteristic gesture of the tyrant. They rule in their own name. They rule in the name of themselves as gods. And of course, the core of their regime is self-indulgence. And they establish themselves as the greatest lovers in the world and expect everybody to admire them and look up to them for that reason. And I offer that so you have some sense of what the ancient understanding of tyranny was. Now, what's odd about Macbeth is he never enjoys his tyranny. Malcolm accuses him of luxuriousness and avarice in Act 4, but I don't see any signs of that in the play. That is, for example, the tyrant is notorious for raping women. We don't see that. Tarquin was required, Tarquinius Superbus was the Roman image of a tyrant because he raped the Roman maiden Lucretia. But Macbeth talks about Tarquin's ravishing strides, but he doesn't ravish anybody. And indeed, almost the saddest thing about him is that he never gets to enjoy this tyranny. And that puzzles me. And I've been trying to think that through. And in particular, what we see about Macbeth is that in his case, the tyrant's concern for security becomes all-consuming. All he thinks about is securing his rule, and that chiefly means killing off anybody who becomes a possible threat to his rule. In that, it seems to me, he resembles modern tyrants more. Now again, the ancient tyrants were murderers. We see at the beginning of Act 4 of Julius Caesar that the triumvirate is executing their political enemies. Still, they have a list. It's a finite list. It runs into the hundreds, and not the millions. And they're executing them for political reasons. They don't, for example, kill women and children. Macbeth does. There's an unusual cruelty to his tyranny, which leads me to think that Shakespeare is being unusually prescient in this play in predicting what the nature of modern tyranny would be like. And I mentioned Hitler and Stalin last time, and I'd like to say a little bit more about them and the nature of modern tyranny. And this is going to sound paradoxical, but this is a very paradoxical play. In Henry V, and you can look it up, it's on page 17 of your editions, Henry says in the first act, "We are no tyrant, but a Christian king." But Macbeth is a Christian tyrant. And that's the odd thing here. Henry acts as if there's a distinction, Christian kings can't be tyrants. Yet what happens when one of these Christians becomes a tyrant? And this is what's so striking about Macbeth that I've been arguing here that he is torn between his status as a pagan warrior and his Christianity. Part of him despises people who are gospeled and wants to be a heroic pagan warrior, but part of him is deeply involved in his conscience, and he's worried about salvation and damnation. As I've been suggesting, the hope of the Renaissance was to create this very positive synthesis of Christianity and classical values. Yet what I'm saying Shakespeare explores in his tragedies is the strange perversions that occur when these two great currents in our civilization come together and distort each other. If Macbeth were simply a pagan warrior, there'd be no tragedy. He maybe wouldn't have killed Duncan. If he did, he could have lived with it the way pagan warriors tend to do. If he were simply Christian, he wouldn't have killed Duncan. What is so odd about Macbeth is expressed by Lady Macbeth, a soldier and a feared. He is a kind of Achilles with a conscience. He's a pagan warrior who nevertheless has had his horizons transformed by Christianity. And in particular, that has made him obsessed with eternity in a way that an Achilles or a Coriolanus simply never was. So that, for example, on page 42, we've looked at this before, but let's look at it again. His concern about Banquo is a concern with eternity. This is Act 3, Scene 1, about line 65. If it be so, for Banquo's issue have I filed my mind, for them the gracious Duncan have I murdered, put rancors in the vessel of my peace, only for them and mine eternal jewel given to the common enemy of man. So on the one hand, he's very concerned that his eternal soul is at stake, and moreover, his whole obsession with Banquo is that Banquo wins the battle for eternity. That Macbeth is going to be king, but the witches have promised that Banquo will be the founder of a line of kings. Still on that page 42, they hailed him father to a line of kings. Upon my head they placed a fruitless crown. On page 47, Lady Macbeth's consolation to Banquo, to Macbeth. That's all running together in one mind. Page 47, Act 3, Scene 2, about line 39, when Macbeth expresses his concern about Banquo and Fleance, Lady Macbeth says, but in them nature's copies not etern. Sense of the play, nature is not eternal. But this play opens up vistas on something beyond nature, supernature, the supernatural that is eternal. And that's what they're questing for. So that, again, to return to page 65, Act 4, Scene 1, line 117, when Macbeth has the vision among the witches of Banquo's succession, what he says is, what will the line stretch out to the crack of doom? And that's his great fear, that Banquo inherits eternity. He inherits the supernatural. Macbeth is somehow confined to this natural world. And his tyranny is so much the greater for this reason. It is that desire for the absolute, for the infinite, for perfection. To be thus is nothing but to be safely thus. And here, this is a very tentative thought, but let me express it anyway, that for the ancient tyrants, they modeled themselves on the ancient gods. And that means on the pagan gods, in a way you could say what the ancient tyrant wanted to be was Zeus. And this is the way it was actually understood in the ancient world, that the ancient tyrant wanted to be a god. And Zeus is a pretty impressive character, and above all, he can have everything he desires, and especially can indulge his sexual desires. And you can really see how these ancient tyrants tried to act out the life of pagan gods. This is going to sound very weird, but I hinted at it last time that Macbeth's notion of being a tyrant is to be the God of Christianity. And that means an omnipotent and omniscient God, something much more. You see this, again, I read these last time, but you can see it on page 56, Act 3, Scene 4, towards the end, line 140. Strange things I have in head that will to hand, which must be acted ere they may be scanned. What Macbeth likes is, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. That is, this is the kind of being who just has to think something, and it happens. This is even stronger on page 66, where he says, this is Act 4, Scene 1, about line 46. From this moment, the very firstlings of my heart shall be the firstlings of my hand, and even now to crown my thought with acts, be it thought and done. This is omnipotence. This is, you just have to think it and it happens. As for omniscience, that's back on page 56 again, and Act 3, Scene 4, top of 56. There's not a one of them, but in his house I keep a servant feed. He has his spy network all throughout Scotland. So he's all-seeing and all-powerful. Now, again, I offer this tentatively, but it does suggest this is, the perversion of the best becomes the worst. One would, the great hope is that Christianity might moderate the fierceness of these pagan heroes, but it only increases Macbeth's cruelty. Because he now thinks perfection's at stake. Remember his reaction to the news that Fleance had escaped. I had else been perfect. Let me see. That's page 51. Act 3, Scene 4, line 22. I had else been perfect. Whole as the marble, founded as a rock, as broad and general as the casing air. It's another indication that his notion is to become a kind of omnipotent God. Founded as a rock, as broad and general as the casing air, whole as the marble. This again is that all or nothing attitude I've been pointing at since Hamlet, that you now have a conception of the infinite and the absolute, and that if you can't achieve that, you have nothing. And in his quest for absolute certainty and absolute security, Macbeth becomes a crueler tyrant than anything you observe in the ancient world. And it did strike me that in this sense, Shakespeare may be incredibly prophetic here in seeing what the nature of tyranny would be in the modern world. I'm going to say that Macbeth's tyranny is a kind of ascetic tyranny, not aesthetic, but ascetic. That is, again, he's not in it for the enjoyment. Indeed, it becomes sort of an endless process now of just trying to secure the throne, and he doesn't indulge his desires. And it strikes me when you think of possibly the two most important modern tyrants, Hitler and Stalin, they both were remarkably ascetic. We don't talk about them indulging in huge orgies and parties the way we do with Latin American and African tyrants and all sorts of other modern tyrants. Stalin studied to be a priest. Hitler studied to be a painter. And they were in it for the kind of pure tyranny. And they show the kind of same obsession with security, the endless concern with security that we see in Macbeth. It's kind of ironic that the great Russian composer Dmitri Shostakovich wrote an opera, Lady Macbeth of Mtsensk, which is an opera created out of a 19th century Russian story that transposed the Macbeth story to Russia. And Stalin hated the opera. In fact, his negative review of it almost ended Shostakovich's life. was kind of interesting that Stalin had to sit there and watch a representation of the Macbeth story, and it didn't please Papa Joe. Now here's the connection I see. A number of people have argued that both communism and Nazism are secularizations of Christianity, and especially Christian millenarianism. That is, that what these modern tyrannies have in common is, for one thing, they present themselves as inevitable, as the inevitable outcome of history. Both Marxism and Nazism have theories of history in which history leads up to Stalin, history leads up to Hitler. In the case of Stalin, you have the Marxist dialectic of history that makes the triumph of communism inevitable, not just likely, not just probable, but inevitable. Hitler famously came up with the Third Reich theory, which is based on medieval notions of the millennium and the Third Kingdom fulfilling human destiny. The other aspect that both Nazism and communism have in mind is that they offer heaven on earth. They are secularizations of the idea of heaven, that we can have heaven on earth, that through this political transformation, whether it's communist or Nazi, we can create a perfect world and a new man and a new woman. Very strong elements both in the Soviet Union and in Nazi Germany. This is Macbeth's, if it could be done when it is done, well, it could be done quickly. If the assassination could trammel up the consequences and catch with this success, but here, that this act might be the be-all and the end-all here, but here upon this bank and shoal of time, we jump to life to come. That is a secularization of the absolute. That's saying we can have the be-all and the end-all, but here, upon this bank and shoal of time. Now, I attribute semi-mystical prophetic powers to Shakespeare. This may be too much on my part, but I think he divines something here, that a new kind of tyranny might emerge in the modern world based upon the idea of somehow the inevitability of history, history marching towards a goal that will be a form of heaven on earth, and this would now be the most savage form of tyranny. And again, I offer this very tentatively because it's claiming a lot for Shakespeare, but the most frightening aspect of Macbeth's tyranny is that humanity itself becomes its enemy. It becomes almost the willful destruction of other human beings. Now again, the ancient tyrants, they wanted other human beings. They enjoyed their honors. They enjoyed the sexual relations. They killed off enemies, but they weren't trying to extirpate the whole population. What's of course so frightening about 20th century tyranny is all of these acts of genocide, mass exterminations, as if the very goal of the state were to eliminate humanity. And you see it in Macbeth in the desire to exterminate the very power of germination. Spill nature's Germans. And again, that's not Germans, but it is his great notion that I want to wipe out generation. And we see it in his wife's impulse to kill her own children. Anyway, there's something unnatural about Macbeth's tyranny. It seems to be directed against nature itself, as if nature is now the enemy, because nature sets limits to human desire and sets limits to the tyrant's desire. Anyway, I sense these connections with the phenomenon of tyranny in the 20th century. Now, in particular, what you see in Macbeth is a supernatural justification for his tyranny. And again, let's not forget that he is set off by these witches making a prophecy that he will be Thane of Quarter and that he will be then king. it's quite interesting that there would be nothing here without page 12. This is Act 1, Scene 3, when Macbeth says, this supernatural soliciting cannot be ill, cannot be good. We could take this as our motto in the course since Hamlet, that this supernatural soliciting cannot be ill, cannot be good. It seems so good, but it turns out to be so ill. And Lady Macbeth, on the bottom of page 16, this is Act 1, Scene 5, about line 30, speaks of all that impedes thee from the golden round, which fate and metaphysical aid does seem to have thee crowned with all. It's amazing. Shakespeare thinks of metaphysical aid here. And again, metaphysics is a very fancy philosophical word. Now all it means in Greek is Aristotle wrote a book called The Physics, and then he wrote a book after it, which was Metaphysika, and that deals with the kind of philosophical questions we now call metaphysics after that book. There's a very literal meaning in Greek, Metaphysika is after physics, after the study of natural things, but still, the talk of supernatural soliciting and metaphysical aid in this work points to this strange distortion of the world. I can't even take you through all the times the word unnatural appears in this play. This obsession with the supernatural and metaphysical aid generates all these unnatural things in the play. And it does seem to be the tragedy of Macbeth that he's drawn into this belief that anything he does is justified by some sense of providence, that he can kill anybody because it's what the universe is willing. Now again, that's an eerie premonition of what men like Hitler and Stalin were to become like. Shakespeare treats this theme at great length in the play. If you turn to page 63, so it's Act 4, Scene 1, about line 75. This is the scene with the witches where Macbeth is introduced to these sights, and first he is warned against Macduff. And then he's given the prophecy, line 80, be bloody, bold, and resolute, laugh to scorn the power of man, for none of woman born shall harm Macbeth, which to him is very reassuring because he believes that all are born of women, and so how can he ever be harmed? And then the third apparition is Macbeth. This is on page 64, line 92. Macbeth shall never vanquished be until great Birnam wood to hide Dunsinane Hill shall come against him. And here it's quite explicit that Macbeth's supernatural confidence rests on a kind of buried belief in the constancy of nature. This is page 64, line 95. Who can impress the forest, bid the tree unfix his earthbound root? Sweet Bodeman's good, rebellious dead, rise never. Again, his hostility to the possibility of resurrection. Till the wood of Burnham rise, and our high place Macbeth shall live the lease of nature. Macbeth says this can't happen. In the course of nature, forests don't move, therefore I am safe. And similarly, his notion, all men are born of women, therefore if I don't have to fear a man born of woman, I don't have to fear any man. Now it is interesting that the sights correspond to sounds here. Macbeth is very much relying on what he hears. Back on page 63, line 78, he says, had I 3 ears, I'd hear thee. But notice the second apparition is a bloody child. These are riddles, and the sights solve the riddle. As we learn, Macduff was born by cesarean section. In that technical sense, he was not born of woman. He did not emerge naturally from the womb. Roman Polanski, in his very lurid film version, shows a scene of a cesarean section at this point. First time I realized what was going on here. Because notice the third apparition is a child crowned with a tree in his hand. which again tips the solution to the riddle to Macbeth there. So these sound like supernatural happenings, a man not born of woman, a forest moving. But it turns out they're perfectly natural events, somewhat out of the ordinary, but nothing mysterious about them. A cesarean section and carrying a branch from a tree. And indeed, this is the way Macbeth finally resolves the problem. Page 95, and when he understands this, so Act 5, Scene 8, line 19, and be these juggling fiends no more believed, that palter with us in a double sense, that keep the word of promise to our ear and break it to our hope. Here he understands that he heard what he wanted to hear. He heard the prophecies. He did not look. If he had looked and relied on what he saw with his own eyes, he would have seen the solutions to the riddles. Now, it's very interesting that on page 26, Macbeth, warned by that vision of a dagger, says, this is Act 2, Scene 1, about line 44, mine eyes are made the fools of the other senses, or else worth all the rest. A very interesting choice presented in the play. What you see with your own eyes and largely what you hear. Now, in this context, there's an interesting passage in the New Testament, Romans chapter 10, verse 17. So faith comes from what is heard. Indeed, we see Macbeth's case, his faith comes from what he hears, not from what he sees. And if he be guided by what he saw, especially in the apparition scene, he might well have been saved here. So again, this is a play that very much problematizes revelation in the way that Hamlet does, the whole issue of the true status of what the ghost presents, and then the whole story of Iago and Othello, where Othello comes to see and hear through Iago, where again a whole scene takes place which between Cassio and Bianca, which we know to be innocent, and which Othello misinterprets because he lets Iago, in effect, narrate it all to him. So again, it's one of the ways in which this play fits into this overall critique in Shakespeare, the impact of revelation on politics. Again, this sense here that Macbeth is distorted into the cruelest form of tyranny by his sense that a whole supernatural force lies behind what he's doing. Okay, I'm almost done for today. I'm now going to try to sum up the whole course with one thematic pattern in Macbeth, and that's the treatment of the word man and the treatment of manliness in the play. Here I'm drawing very heavily on an essay by Jose Benedetti. It's called Macbeth's Last Words. It was in the first volume of a journal called Interpretation. There's a citation. But if you just Google Jose Benedetti Macbeth, the whole issue comes up, and it's pages 63 to 76. It's one of the best essays written on Macbeth, and I'll just steal from the essay as I go along. I won't try to present it in Benedetti's words. But in a way, the whole debate we've been looking at this semester in Shakespeare between the ancient pagan world and the modern Christian world, between what Nietzsche calls mass morality and slave morality, and Benedetti introduces the terms master and slave morality in this essay. It's all summed up in the debate of what it is to be a man in this play. If you turn to page 22, so this is Act 1, Scene 7, the argument between Lady Macbeth and Macbeth over whether to kill Duncan. And she's accusing him of lacking valor. Remember, we began this course with Coriolanus and valor is the chiefest virtue. This is line 39. Art thou afeard to be the same thing in thine own act and valor as thou art in desire? Wouldst thou have that which thou esteemest the ornament of life, and live a coward in thine own esteem? This is the greatest challenge a warrior can have to his honor. To be called a coward, and especially to be called a coward by a woman and his wife. This is Lady Macbeth's very deliberate attempt to shame this noble warrior into doing the deed. Macbeth says, "Prithee peace, I dare do all that may become a man, who dares do more is not." And this opens up the question that the whole play deals with, is what is a man? And the question is, what beast was it then that made you break this enterprise to me? When you durst do it, then you were a man. Lady Macbeth challenges him with the ancient notion of manliness, that manliness is valor, it's courage. Now, I started my whole discussion, Macbeth, with page 43, which also bears on this issue of what is a man. Remember, this is when Macbeth challenges the murderers. Act 3, scene 1, about line 88. Are you so gospelled to pray for this good man and for his issue, whose heavy hand hath bowed you to the grave and beggared yours forever? We are men, my liege. And in context, what that means is we are men, not Christians. Real men are not Christians. The gospel, sit back and take it. They don't stand up for themselves. And Macbeth goes on to say, to question the definition of man here. Is man a term of distinction? Aye, in the catalogue you go for men, as hounds and greyhounds, mongrels, spaniels, curs, choughs, water rugs, and demi-wolves are clept all by the name of dogs. The valued file distinguishes the swift, the slow, the subtle, the housekeeper, the hunter, every one according to the gift which bounteous nature hath in him closed, where he but doth receive particular addition from the bill that writes them all alike, and so of men. Now, if you have a station in the file, not in the worst rank of manhood. It's a very aristocratic understanding here. There are different kinds of men, and real men are valiant and full of valor. They're manly, they're warriors. They fight for their rights. They don't sit back and take it from other men. This is a distinction that goes back to ancient Greek. I forget if I talked about this before, but if I did, you can always repeat yourself in the last lecture. In ancient and Homeric Greek, there are two terms for man, one aner and one anthropos. Aner is the word for a male human being, and anthropos is the word for human being. I mean, this is the word man is ambiguous in English. It can either mean a male or it can mean humanity. And indeed, we've been warned not to use the word man to refer, we're supposed to talk about humankind, not mankind, and so on. But this is, in many languages, the word for a male is the same as the word for the generic human being. In Greek, no. And the Homeric heroes, they call each other aner. And the sense of aner is of a he-man. That's the best way to understand it. These heroes, Achilles, Ajax, Odysseus, they're all Andres, that's the Greek plural. Each one's an aner, in the sense he's a he-man. In modern languages, the best translation of aner would be into Spanish, hombre. In no other language that I know does it have quite the force of Greek aner. When you say hombre, you know what you mean. That's because an hombre has cojones, if you really want to know what I mean. And again, it works in other languages, but if you really want to understand the force that aner, and the heroes step up to each other and they call each other aner. I mean, the way athletes now say man. and I might add female athletes say man. But anyway, hombre aner, it's the word for the hero, and it's a very aristocratic term. The ordinary human beings, they're just anthropoi. That's the plural of anthropos. They're just ordinary human beings. This is very strong in the Iliad. It's often presented as the difference between two species, the difference between a lion and a lamb. The heroes, the aner is a lion, the ordinary anthropos is a lamb. And we saw that in Coriolanus. A very strong sense of this in Coriolanus. This is mass morality. It's the ancient aristocratic understanding of humanity. Now, again, even within the Greek world, they move beyond this. The great thrust of Greek philosophy is to take the anthropos point of view. But already in the Odyssey, there are many ways in which Odysseus is more the anthropos than the aner. This is the view that's classically embodied in the Iliad. But even within the ancient Greek world, they were moving beyond this to the sense that the aner isn't everything. That there's an anthropos side to human beings that may make them better. And so Odysseus is not just a heroic butcher, although he is that, but he cares about his wife and his family, and he's clever, he's smarter than Achilles. There are all these things he has. He's attached to a female goddess, Athena, so on. So what I'm saying is we see that sense of two meanings of man emerge back in that dialogue I started with Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. When Macbeth says, this is back on page 22, "Prithee peace, I dare do all that may become a man," he's talking anthropos here. I dare do all that may become a human being. A human being has certain moral limits. Who dares do more is none. There's a sense here, an aner, a he-man, an hombre, he's too much in the grip of Thumas, remember that from Coriolanus, and will do these savage things. Lady Macbeth seems to understand, what beast was it then that made you break this enterprise to me? When you durst do it, then you were a man, then you were an aner, then you were an hombre, then you had cojones. You don't now. You see what the debate is, and to be more than what you were, you would be so much more the man. The question is, what is a man? Is it a human being who has perhaps some compassion, who has some moral compunctions, or is a man just an hombre, the kind of guy we saw in the opening scene who cut someone in half and was praised for it? And you see the consequences of Lady Macbeth's radical, on-air view of man. Line 54, "I have given suck, and know how tender 'tis to love the babe that milks me. I would, while it was smiling in my face, have plucked my nipple from his boneless gums and dashed the brains out, had I so sworn as you have done to this." And it's very interesting in her obsessive attachment to the aner or hombre view of man. She denies her own womanliness to the point, saying the unimaginable thing here, a woman who would destroy her own child. And then Macbeth says, if we should fail, we fail. But screw your courage to the sticking place and we'll not fail. Everything here is Homeric. Everything is like the Roman Republic. Everything hinges on valor and courage. And this leads Macbeth to say, "Bring forth men children only, for thy undaunted meadows should compose nothing but males." Pretty frightening aspect, a woman who is so full of the aner principle that she can only have men children. Now again, when I mention this of the ancient Greeks, their emphasis on the he-man, it may sound sexist to you, and in a way it is. But it is fascinating that in Greek tragedy, the Greeks use the word aner of women. And there are two extraordinary examples when it happens. One is in Antigone, when Creon complains that Antigone's stubbornness and says, "You are the on air here, not me." It's really an extraordinary moment in Greek with this word that strongly means he-man. And Creon says to this little slip of a girl, Antigone, "You're the hombre here, not me." And similarly of Clytemnestra in the Oresteia, the woman who murders Agamemnon, she's called an on air at one point. So although this is a very strong contrast between the masculine and feminine principles, even the ancient Greeks don't confine it to biological males and females. You can say in ancient Greek that a woman is an on air, and oh man, if there ever were an hombre, it's Lady Macbeth here. It's what makes her heroic in her own way. Of course, it puts this enormous strain on her that ultimately she cracks under. So what I'm getting at here is you can see the great debate between classical and Christian values in the debate over the word man in Macbeth. Lady Macbeth is speaking up for the classical, Homeric, heroic understanding of man as the he-man, as the hombre, as the on air. Macbeth, paradoxically it seems, is speaking up for a broader Christian understanding of man as humaneness. He even talks of Christianity as humane statute. Now, what's really fascinating is this exact debate is reprised between Malcolm and Macduff at the end of the play. This is on page 79. The news has reached Macduff that all his children have been killed. And Malcolm, who plays Lady Macbeth in the scene, remember, Macduff is the on air. He's the he-man. He's the remaining Thane that's the only one that can beat Macbeth in hand-to-hand combat, not Malcolm. Malcolm had to be rescued in the opening scene. He's right there with his father, Duncan. What bloody man is this? But Malcolm knows he needs Macduff here, and so he rouses. He's going to, what a great opportunity. His family's been killed. We're going to get Macduff out on the warpath. And so he says, line 219, "Dispute it like a man. I shall do so, but I must also feel it as a man." And then an incredible line, I cannot but remember such things were that were most precious to me. One of the great examples of understatement in Shakespeare. He knows when understatement works. But anyway, "Dispute it like a man, I shall do so, but I must also feel it as a man." It's the same dispute again. What is a man? Is a man simply disputatious? Is it simply one of these contentious he-men on the battlefield? Or is it someone who also allows for feeling? And notice on page 80, Macduff says, "Oh, I could play the woman with mine eyes," line 230 in this scene, "and brag it with my tongue." But now he's going to go and fight Macduff. And Malcolm says, "This time goes manly." Now, it's uncanny how similar these two dialogues are. They both turn on the issue of what is a man, whether to be a man is to be a heroic warrior, or whether it's to be something more that encompasses feeling and compassion. And both sides have the debate. That's what I want you to see. That, again, it's very simple to read this play as Macbeth as uniquely evil, and that he's the only problem in Scotland. But I've been trying to suggest Banquo, and for that matter, Macduff, have a lot in common with Macbeth. It's very similar in the sense that they both are heroic warrior types, and they each one could have been the other. Banquo's almost seduced by the witches. There's a cruel side of Macduff that led his wife and children there to be killed, and that even he feels guilty about. And here we see it. The debate over manliness extends throughout Scotland. It's on both sides. Lady Macbeth and Macbeth have it, and Macduff and Malcolm have it. And one of the most interesting reflections of that is right at the end, again, one might feel like saying, only Macbeth becomes victim to the He-Man view of what a man is, and therefore he becomes this butcher, this murderer. But in fact, the good party, the English and the good Scottish are the same way. Look at page 84. As the army is gathering near Dunsinane, Act 5, Scene 2, line 10, and many unroughed youths that even now protest their first of manhood. So these young English and the Scots, they're going to prove their manliness in the battle. And then the strongest reflection of this, page 96, this again shows you how Shakespeare complicates things. Act 5, Scene 8, line 39, when Seward learns the news of his son. Your son, my lord, has paid a soldier's debt. He only lived but till he was a man, the which no sooner had his prowess confirmed in the unshrinking station where he fought, but like a man he died. And that is like an honoré. That's like an hombre. It's not like a human being he died. He died like a man. That he is dead, Seward asks. Is that the Seward cry? No. Aye, and brought off the field, your cause of sorrow must not be measured by his worth, for then it hath no end. Ross is inviting him here to weep his heart out. Your cause of sorrow must not be measured by his worth, for then it hath no end. And what does Seward say? Had he his hurts before, I on the front. In other words, did he die running from battle or going into it? He died going into battle. Why then, God's soldiers be he, had I as many sons as I have heirs, I would not wish them to a fairer death, and so his knell is knolled. Does that remind you of Volumnia back in Coriolanus? It really, it's that same attitude. Malcolm, he's worth more sorrow, and that I'll spend for him. He's worth no more. They say parted well and paid his score. So it's really, the on-air view is there among the victors as well. And of course, it's there in Macbeth's own death. Just quickly to wind up on page 95, Act 5, Scene 8, about line 18, when Macbeth finally learns the solution to this riddle of the Caesarean section, he says, accursed be that tongue that tells me so, for it hath cowed my better part of man. And that's manliness again. That's cojones, that's the hombre. And so Macbeth's last words, and that's where we get Jose Benedetti's article, are line 32, lay on, Macduff, and damn be him that first cries hold enough. Macbeth dies re-embracing the heroic principle he began with as a Homeric warrior in the opening scenes. So I end with this, I'm going to end the whole course with this, in the sense that here we see the great debate we've been seeing played out here, the debate between the classical notion of heroic manliness, the aristocratic strength of Coriolanus on fair ground, I could beat 40 of them, and these new Christian notions that put the emphasis on suffering. And I've been raising Machiavelli a lot. Of course, let me return to what I began with from Machiavelli, and I think it will round out things for you. This is that passage from page 131, the Discourses. You've heard it, I think, twice before, or maybe 3 times in the course, but I hope that by now it will mean a lot more to you. Thinking then whence it can arise that in those ancient times people were more lovers of freedom than in these, I believe it arises from the same cause that makes men less strong now, which I believe is the difference between our education and the ancient, founded on the difference between our religion and the ancient. For our religion, having shown the truth and the true way, makes us esteem less the honor of the world, whereas the Gentiles, the pagans, esteeming it very much and having placed the highest good in it, were more ferocious in their actions. Besides this, the ancient religion did not beatify men if they were not full of worldly glory, as were captains of armies and princes of republics. Our religion has glorified humble and contemplative more than active man. It has then placed the highest good in humility, abjectness, and contempt of things human. The other placed it in greatness of spirit, strength of body, and all other things capable of making men very strong. And if our religion asks that you have strength in yourself, it wishes you to be capable more of suffering than of doing something strong. This mode of life thus seems to have rendered the world weak and given it in prey to criminal men who can manage it securely, seeing that the collectivity of men, so as to go to paradise, think more of enduring their beatings than of avenging them. And that's the story of Duncan right there, who Duncan in his piety and his clemency and his mercy abandons the world to men like Macbeth, who rule cruelly. I cannot prove that Shakespeare knew that passage. He did not need to know that passage. In fact, he was capable of looking at the Renaissance world and seeing this tension between classical and Christian culture himself. I'll end with one line from Macbeth. The most Nietzschean line in all of Shakespeare, the most Nietzschean line before Nietzsche. This is page 29, Act 2, Scene 2, line 45. When Lady Macbeth says to Macbeth, "You do unbend your noble strength to think so brainly of things." I will repeat that so the music doesn't drown it out. You do unbend your noble strength. You do unbend your noble strength to think so brain sickly of things. What an incredible line. The contrast between noble strength and what Lady Macbeth sees as the brain sickliness of this modern world. So, as I've been trying to show throughout the semester, Shakespeare really does draw upon political issues in his plays. They give so much more depth to them when we ask these political questions. He is doing something along the lines of what a number of the great political thinkers have done. I brought up Plato and Aristotle and Machiavelli and Nietzsche. I could have brought up others. I hope that Shakespeare sounds more interesting to you when you see him in light of these political ideas. And I hope I've shown that he is a genuine political thinker who in many ways drew upon Plato and Aristotle and Machiavelli and anticipated Nietzsche. At the same time, I hope maybe I got you interested in Plato and Aristotle and Machiavelli and Nietzsche. What I'd say about this, maybe the ultimate value of studying Shakespeare in politics is to see that politics is a perhaps more elevated subject than election polling data. You can do regression analyses on election results all day, but Shakespeare reminds us that politics is a lot more than that. And above all, it involves a conception of what is the good life for human beings. That's why he's so concerned about the debate between the classical and Christian positions on this subject. And he really shows that political questions open up the deepest questions, both about human nature and what's best in human life. So with that, I'll bring this to a close. Now, let's throw things open to questions about the exam, anything else you'd like to, or anything else you'd like to know about. Yeah, well, I mean, clearly, I've concentrated on some of the negative things that Christianity introduces into political life, but in broader terms of human life, it obviously opens up all sorts of new horizons. And one of those is the interior of the human soul. The characters like Hamlet, Macbeth, and Othello are just deeper than characters like Coriolanus and even Brutus and Julius Caesar, and maybe even Antony and Cleopatra, though the whole point I was showing about Antony and Cleopatra is with the dissolution of the ancient world, some of that human interiority begins to open up along lines that are parallel to the development of Christianity. Again, when in the ancient world, the focus is so much on political life that it narrows people's horizons. And even the philosophy in the ancient world tends to be politicized. So it's things like Epicureanism and Stoicism, which are doctrines, which are almost like party formulations, which these Romans like Brutus and Cassius clearly adapt adopt to their political ends. So that Brutus's stoicism almost seems like a political stance and not a true form of philosophy, which would be self-examination. Whereas, you know, what you said, the great line in Milton's Paradise Lost, Satan says it, for who would lose, though filled with pain, those thoughts that wander through eternity. And that's what you start to see in Hamlet, Macbeth, and Othello, especially Hamlet, Macbeth, that you see thoughts that wander through eternity, that these eternal vistas have opened up, and these characters are more thoughtful. I mean, you know, again, you can see it in the contrast between Coriolanus's abortive soliloquies and Macbeth's genuine self-examinations in his soliloquies. People have begun to think more in this world, and they've begun to think more because the political has lost much of its centrality in human life when you start to speak about an afterlife. Now, as I've shown, that leads to some problems when people try to base a politics on an afterlife, and particularly on the notion that you see in Macbeth, that trying to realize the afterlife here in this life leads to a tremendous distortion of politics. But still, there's a new kind of thoughtfulness, and certainly in Hamlet, the word philosophy comes up. It's really summed up when Hamlet says to Horatio, there are more things in heaven and earth that are dreamt of in your philosophy. Horatio seems to represent the ancient world, perhaps specifically Stoicism. And that really is Hamlet talking about just what I'm pointing to here, the opening up of horizons. That we first saw when Antony and Cleopatra said, we have to find out new heaven, new earth. The ancient world, as Shakespeare portrays it in Coriolanus, was so enclosed. Again, as we saw, the city almost has a roof. It sets narrow horizons for its citizen. It doesn't want them thinking about eternal questions because it wants them in battle. But now in this Christian world, which flows out of a critique of politics, 'tis paltry to be Caesar, saw that in Antony and Cleopatra, and it's certainly very much at the heart of Hamlet, that he has so many doubts about Denmark. Denmark's a prison. I could be bounded in a nutshell and count myself king of infinite space. That's where this new interest in the infinite, the eternal, the absolute, these are all, I mean, they are in fact metaphysical terms. And we see the characters have, in a way, become metaphysical. Even Macbeth, even a guy whose profession is to cut people in half, starts to be thinking about his eternal jewel and the crack of doom and all these things that are much larger questions. And I mean, that, I think Shakespeare sees that as why his world is so much more interesting than the ancient world, even though he admired the ancient world and made a huge effort to recreate it on a stage. Now, again, if we, my greatest regret is that we did not do King Lear, which actually features a dialogue between a king and a philosopher in the central scene of its central act. Unfortunately, we do not hear that dialogue, so we'll never know what happened. But and in Shakespeare's possibly last play, The Tempest, is all about, in my view, a philosopher king. So there's a lot more treatment of philosophy in Shakespeare. Oddly enough, in some of the comedies, again, I regret not having, you know, we did in some ways the darkest of all the comedies by doing Merchant of Venice. I was in New York to do As You Like It, not on the stage, but in a seminar. And it struck me, I was telling a couple of the students before we began, I guess, I wish we'd done As You Like It, just so you could see there's a light side to Shakespeare. And it's part of his own philosophical disposition that in his comedies he doesn't take all this politics that seriously. So, other questions? Okay, if I got time here, I'm going to go ahead and end with what I was going to end with. I'm going to regret this, but here goes. You guys are always asking me to relate stuff to contemporary politics. So, December 3rd, 2012. Doesn't get much contemporary. I'm still hooked up to my UVA email. I get this email yesterday from the office of Governor Bob McDonnell in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I want to show you that this very debate we've looked at today is still going on in our culture, though completely submerged and obliterated in modern politics. Dear fellow state employees, I'm a state employee in Virginia, the First Lady and I would like to invite you to the annual Capitol tree lighting this Friday, December 7th, 2012 at 5 p.m. on the south portico of the Capitol in Richmond. This year, in addition to the tree lighting, we will recognize and pay tribute to the U.S. military by featuring music by the National Guard's 29th Division Band, hosting veterans from each war, the Revolutionary, and presenting guest speakers Captain Bill Haneke, U.S. Army retired. Captain Haneke is a very severely wounded Vietnam veteran, reputed to be the most severely wounded warrior ever to have survived. I wonder what Coriolanus would say about that. We will also have another very special guest that evening, 6-year-old Nathan Norman and his family. Nathan is a brave warrior who has battled numerous serious health challenges and taught his family and friends so much through his love, strength, and faith. Nathan displays the same qualities as the soldiers who will also be recognized this evening, bravery and selflessness. To salute Nathan and his passion for those in uniform, emergency response vehicles will line North Drive leading up to the mansion for the tree lighting and open house. Now, I've been talking in this course about our culture as a secularization of the Christian reinterpretation of the Roman appropriation of Greek culture. And I can't imagine a better representation of that than this message from my governor, Bob McDonnell. First of all, notice he's inviting me to the annual Capitol tree lighting this Friday. It's not a Christmas tree. Of course, it can't be a Christmas tree because that's not separation of church and state anymore. It can't even be a pagan Festival of Lights ceremony. It's just the Capitol tree light. And then we bring together the two conceptions of man here, the aner and the anthropos. We got the real army there, and you know, I assume this man, Bill Haneke, was a very brave man and underwent something very horrible. Though notice, and again, in Coriolanus we saw that the ancient hero prided himself on his wounds, but it also was the sense that Coriolanus triumphed in those battles in which he got the wounds. Here, there's a kind of transformation going on here where this man, what's his claim to fame? He's the most severely wounded warrior ever to have survived. No sense that he won a battle, but just that his suffering. And that then links him up with Nathan Norman, this 6-year-old, who again, I assume is a very courageous kid. And I don't know what his health challenges are, but they must be something really horrible and moving. And yet Nathan displays the same qualities as the soldiers. That's the illusion that Shakespeare is concerned about. The line about, remember about Henry V, he is as full of valor as of kindness, princely in both. That Shakespeare saw as the hope of the Renaissance, that you could bring together these two understandings of man, these two understandings of what virtue is, and they'd be perfectly harmonious here. And that's the same thing here, the way in which a kind of classical admiration of the military blends together with a very Christian sense of selflessness and surviving, enduring suffering. Just what Machiavelli was talking about in that passage I read. The two notions blend together in this one speech. And again, it struck me as reading it on email yesterday that this whole debate that Shakespeare's examining, or this whole confluence in our culture of these two, in many respects, antithetical visions of humanity. They're still here, only we've gotten them confused. Shakespeare helps us articulate them. Remember, I would have blowed up the town, so Christ saved me. I offered you that as Shakespeare's understanding that ordinary people, they don't understand that the components of their culture may be antithetical. That's the point of Shakespearean tragedy, to remind us of that. That there's something a little complicated about saying Nathan displays the same qualities as the soldiers also be recognized this evening. And it's very nice to say, and it makes you feel good to say that, but is it really true? That's what Shakespeare forces us to ask. Are there people in the world like Macbeth and Coriolanus who have valor and courage and are maybe not so nice and maybe not compatible with a Christian sense of compassion? So I don't want to disagree with my governor. I don't want to get myself in trouble, although secretly I'm hoping to be banished from Virginia by these remarks, and I've noticed Harvard has a program for persecuted scholars, and maybe I can be brought back with some Tibetan because I'm no longer I'm persona non grata in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Anyway, I know you guys want to see things related to the contemporary, and it doesn't get any more contemporary than that. And I hope it does help you grasp that we have an incredibly complicated culture, and above all, this strange confluence of classical and Christian values, which Shakespeare, I think, intuited already in the Renaissance, how basic this was to our civilization, and he wanted to help us articulate. That's why, again, if we change the order that I've presented these plays, you can see that he was driving to the point where after Macbeth, he went back to write Coriolanus to study the Aner in his proper setting, and then wrote Antony and Cleopatra to show how you get from this classical understanding to the Christian understanding. So